Okay, good morning, everyone. We've still got a few people just filtering through and into the virtual reception, the virtual waiting room. So I'll fill momentarily while those latecomers. And it is quite a long commute this morning, in fairness, so we make allowances for that. Welcome to the Creative Pro Manchester digital conference for 2020. It's the first time we've done one of these virtually like this today. Not the first time Pro Manchester has, but it's the first time our sector group has. And it's the first time I've ever been to a virtual conference. So I always think if you're doing something for the first time, be the host, because that's, what can go wrong if you're the host of something you're doing for the first time. It's the return of the B conference. You might have been to one or two of them before. We had B Social back in the day, and it was preceded by another brand of conference called Conference Number 8. If you're even older, you might remember that one. What they're all about basically is bringing the latest kind of knowledge and thinking from the sector and sharing it in a relevant way with people working in professional services, working in marketing and working in digital and tech. Bit of a knowledge share, talk about some of the most prevalent themes at the moment and some of the trends and things we expect to see into next year as well, so that you'll be able to get a bit of early insight into what's on the horizon and how things might be shaping up, that you'll be able to feed into your roles or your careers. As you can imagine, a lot of the agenda has been shaped by the events of this year, inescapable as they are. But we've tried not to, this isn't a COVID conference. This isn't how does creative and digital do COVID. This is aimed at looking beyond that. So we'll hear about how we've been impacted and our businesses and our clients' businesses and the society has been impacted. But we'll also hear what's coming next. How can we build better, build back better, as they say, into 2021 and beyond. And we're going to touch upon, as I say, all the most relevant aspects of marketing along the way, hopefully. That's the theory anyway. So our first panel, which I'm going to welcome, sorry, it's not a panel. It's a session with Mike and Lee. Mike Pye and Lee Ali, and they're going to be talking about assessment-based marketing and some of the cool things that professional services businesses can do, some of the challenges that they face, and some of the ways around those challenges. So without further ado, I will hand over to Mike and Lee and see you all very soon.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everybody. Can I just check that you can all see the screen? Dan, can you just give us a notification that you can see our slides okay?
Yeah, I can see it.
Perfect. Nice one.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Dan. Great to be here. We're going to not try and mention the C word. So what we're going to do is talk about assessment-based marketing, what it is, and how it can actually help professional service-based businesses to create a personalized journey, if you like, for their prospects and for their customers. So just to give you some background, Mike and myself have been working together for the past 5 or 6 years. Mike has been supporting my exhibitions business, where we help businesses at trade shows to engage with their target audience. And what happened over the past 12 months since we had the lockdown at the back end of March, we started talking about that prospect to customer journey and looking at some of the challenges that businesses face in terms of how they actually connect with their prospects and how they actually generate leads and so on. And the common theme was that as business owners, we have a number of challenges, like talking to the wrong type of clients. We have challenges with assessing whether the businesses are right for us if we want to do business with us. We look at You know, do the customers have a capacity to pay? Are they wasting our time? And then the other thing is we look at how can we differentiate ourselves amongst all of the other competition. And being in a professional service-based business, the challenge is always how to actually differentiate yourself and not focus on just the ability to work on a price basis. So what we did was we looked at, okay, how can professional service-based businesses align their sales and marketing and actually improve how they can actually deal with their prospect base and create a more compelling and interesting prospect to customer journey. So we came together and thought, let's look at a way where businesses can bridge that gap between sales and marketing in one simple way, and the answer was assessment-based marketing. Now, could I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So what we're going to look at today is how we use assessment in business. Look at some of the key issues with problems with business development. And then obviously we're going to look at how to create a non-intrusive and engaging way to drive it, highly qualified business leads that can actually help your business grow. We're going to look at some examples of where assessment-based marketing is in practice already and how it's actually helping those businesses to grow their business, and how to implement assessment-based marketing and sales in your business in an easy way without the challenges of creating another business channel. So we looked at, so we have a questionnaire. Since we actually launched the business, e5interactive.io, we're practicing what we're preaching. So on our website, we asked the question, how engaged are your business leads with your business? So, and it's a questionnaire about 40 questions long, and we've collected some data, and the responses so far, we've had, I think, over 100 people actually take the assessment, and we found some really interesting data, and there's 3 examples of questions here that we've asked. And the first question is, have you defined your complete prospect to customer journey? And it seems that 45% of businesses don't actually have a defined prospect to customer journey where they've actually said, right, this is what happens at each stage during that journey. So from the lead capture to the assessment of the client to the actual closing of the sale and issuing of the invoice. So it's, I mean, that's quite a eye-opening figure when you realize that 45% of businesses who've taken the survey don't have that definition. So then you look at the second question is, do you offer any kind of assessment or review to understand your client's needs? And you can see there's still a gap in the market where 35% of businesses don't offer any kind of assessment. But the positive news is that 65% of businesses are still managing to do that. And another key question here is, do you struggle to differentiate value? And this kind of backs up our theory in that professional service-based businesses do struggle, and it is quite a high figure of 65% of businesses do struggle with differentiating their services from their competitors. So in the world today, I mean, we are in the business world today, all of us in business are using assessments of some kind in our businesses. So here are some really good examples. So you have a contact form on a website, you have surveys. In the recruitment industry, we're using profile assessments all the time. We're looking at the customer needs analysis. A lot of businesses have a needs analysis form. When they actually engage with the client, they sit down with them, ask a lot of questions, and they go through that assessment, especially in the financial sector, for example, where they actually go through a questionnaire to assess a person's ability to, or how they actually want to invest their money, for example. So I had one last year where they looked at how risk averse I was. Yeah, so we're actually using assessment-based marketing, and the key behind this is what it actually gives us is the data. And data this year has, come to the forefront, and there is a revolution. I mean, we've had the industrial revolution, we've had the internet revolution, and what's happening now is that we actually have the data revolution, where data is driving a lot of the decisions that businesses make. And the key thing here about assessments is how you actually capture that data and how you actually use it to assess business and your customers as well, and to help your customers and prospects as well. So moving on. So for us, assessments are all about helping you to learn, helping your prospects to learn in an interactive way, and helping you as a business to make better decisions and faster. So it's all about getting your prospects to get them thinking. There is an aspect of gamification as well. So if you're putting a questionnaire out there, you are actually challenging people. So and you're arousing curiosity as well, and you're actually rewarding that experience with actually giving them something back. And for you as a business, you're actually getting data in a non-intrusive way. So in our businesses, we all have common sales challenges. And here's some examples. I mean, as we discussed earlier, a lot of businesses don't have a clear strategy in how they actually go from, how they take their prospects along that journey. We have, again, a lot of the professional service business, they are all professionals, and they don't actually necessarily have the right sales experience to be able to take customers through that journey. And then obviously the other challenge we have is a lot of professional service-based businesses work on referrals, and sometimes they're actually blind referrals because you don't actually know what that person wants, and sometimes you end up going through that process, and at the end of the day there is no requirement from that referral. And then obviously there's a poor qualification process in place as well, where you may have a contact form on your website, people come through with a name and an email, and you end up chasing them forever. Sometimes those people just want that bit of extra information, and it just makes me think in my trade show experience, a lot of businesses thought that collecting names and email, they actually, we have some clients, especially technology-based clients, where they just want to scan your badge and they classify those as leads. And I've been forever fighting a battle to say to businesses, no, that's not a lead, it's just data of it's an email and address, and you don't actually know what that person actually is looking for. So it's, you're collecting data obviously from the forms, but it's not necessarily the right kind of data. So the challenge is, how do we actually use assessments to actually collect the right kind of data and use it in a way that actually helps and motivates our prospects to do business with us. So I was looking at, when we were preparing for this, we were looking at some key data, and there's a report that came out in September, and it was done by Salesforce, the CRM system. And what kind of backed up Mike's and my thinking was that the research that they did, what they found was that the sales leaders will actually, over the next 12 months, what they're looking to do is take a personalized outreach program, a simplified sales process, and improve data quality and accessibility. And that, and the reason for that is a lot of salespeople are having a major challenge in terms of figuring out what's actually valuable to them. As you can see here, there's 75% of sales leaders out there actually trying to figure out what kind of data is actually the most valuable to them. And the other major challenge is knowing how to access that information.
Try and join this.
Sorry?
Oh, yeah.
So what was that?
Okay.
Okay, moving on. So this kind of backs up where sales leaders are looking at ways to personalize their approach to their prospects. What I will do now is I will hand over to Mike, and he's going to actually he's going to talk you through about defining the prospect to customer journey and how you can use assessments in that process.
Cheers, Lee. So I think one of the biggest challenges that I've found in my career today, I mean, we work very heavily with professional service and consultancy-based businesses which offer a service of real expertise, but in a market where there's also lots of businesses offering services with real expertise. And how can the customer know who to choose and which business is the one to trust more and where they should be spending their money? And one of the biggest challenges I found through that process is helping businesses, one, understand who they want to do business with, and then helping them create a systematic approach to getting more of those type of clients and taking them through to a stage where more of them are being qualified, more of them are being spoken to, and more of them are coming through the door as potential customers. And the way that we do that is helping them work out this sort of 4-stage process. And that the first part of that is having a really, really deep understanding of that target customer. So that's who they are, where they can be found, their pains, their challenges, what type of customer actually has the ability to pay for the service that you're offering, what do they value in terms of what they're looking for, at what point do they buy in their buying cycle as well, to understand what kind of content we need to create at each stage to take them through that journey. And finally, their communication style is a really important part as well, because a lot of businesses may have different types of buyers, different types of seniority within the businesses that they're working in, and really understanding who they are and how they like to communicate is a really important part of developing that content strategy too. So knowing, for example, that if you're speaking to somebody who requires a lot of information to make decisions, is a very different way of creating content to target someone perhaps who is a very, very reactive CEO type person who wants quick information in a simple, easy to digest way to help them make decisions quicker. So the first part of really understanding that prospect to customer journey is that deep understanding of the customer to start with, and that helps lay out the process of all the different stages as we progress. And then we need to create a strategy which is really focused on targeting this ideal customer type. So creating a strategy that drives the right kind of leads, the people who have the ability to pay, have the challenges that you can particularly solve, and creating a strategy which from a content perspective and from an acquisition perspective is targeting the right kind of people and building more at the top part of that funnel. And then it's being able to create a system where you're actually getting data from those people to help inform their decision making, but also the way that you speak to them, so that you can create the conversations and the relationships based on the real close need analysis of that particular person, so that you can have really, really defined and pointed conversations. So the ultimate purpose of that is so that you can speed up the process from them not knowing anything about you to knowing you, understanding that you have a solution to their problems, them getting to the point where they like and trust you, so that it speeds up the process where you can actually get to the point where you can start that sales conversation. And the thing that we need to be able to do that is data and information. And typically, I know for my business and for a lot of the businesses that I work with, they have a very long sales process. It could be 12 months between finding a prospect and actually doing business with them. For others, it's a lot quicker, but a lot of the time, that reason for the slowness of that process is because of the multiple touch points and the multiple conversations they're going to have, all the meetings, all the phone calls, all the presentations, for them to go through this process, whereby we can speed that up by being able to have a really close understanding of their needs and challenges through using different techniques. So just to explain that a little bit more, when a customer is making a decision, they go through quite a few different stages internally in their psychology. So from a standing start, when they first make contact or they first understand that they might need a solution, they're at a point where they're going from a status quo of not knowing they've even got a problem to starting to think about, actually, that I've got a problem and I might need to find a solution. And from that stage, they're then going to go through a few different thought processes. Why do they need to find a solution? Who are they going to look to provide it? Why choose that person? Why invest money in it? And when should they invest money in it? And then why should they actually choose a specific provider? And our job as marketers and as business owners is to help them with that decision-making process. It's to help them understand why they need to change their way of thinking and why they need a solution. Is to understand why they should choose us and how we differentiate from the competition, to justify their investment in us, help them prioritize their spend, and help take them through and guide them through the process of working with us. And that's where assessments can really help. It can really help speed up that process, because if we've got a really detailed knowledge of a customer's needs and challenges, if we understand really closely about their business and how they've got to this point and where they're looking to go next, it means that we can have very, very detailed conversations with them, build relationships from the start with conversations that are really focused on their specific challenges. So it's not a general needs analysis. We can go straight to the point and really help them with their challenges. And we can really differentiate our value by really sort of telling stories, creating content which reflects the challenges that they're having, and starts to build trust in our businesses. So just moving on slightly onto how we can actually use assessment across the marketing mix. So I'm going to go a couple of examples of how other businesses are using it, but just to sort of set the scene, I just wanted to explain this process. So at the starting point, we need to understand our customer journey, we need to understand our target customer, and we want to understand what we want to achieve by creating those assessments and the data that we need to guide those conversations. So the starting point is actually creating the assessment itself, which can be in lots and lots of different ways. The technology allows us to do simple yes/no questions. It now allows us to gamify it, create quizzes, put really detailed formulas in place if you want people to give you very, very specific information. So we create an assessment itself, and then we can use it across all our different marketing channels. We can use it on our websites as a lead generation tool. Both Lee and I are using it for our own specific businesses, and a number of clients are using it on their businesses' websites as a means to capture data, but in a very, very interactive and gamified way. We can use it as a tool to get out across social media. We can use it as a tool for events and webinars. So this is something we've been doing heavily over the last few weeks, and a lot of our clients are too. So actually during a webinar or an event or ahead of or after, we can send assessments out and use that as a way to guide the content that we're delivering within the event itself. So an example of that is a few of the graphs that we showed at the start of today. We could do that interactive during the event, or we can lean on data that we've got from attendees to actually really personalize the content that we're delivering. And we can use it as well through the day-to-day new prospect meetings that we're having. So whenever I, for example, go and meet a new client, I always ask them to take our assessment first, to help give me the information I need to guide that conversation, but also help to build trust from their part as well. I'm going to show you how that happens on the next slide. So we've got a couple of examples here. One that is maybe very well known to some of you. So there's a business called Dent, run by a gentleman called Daniel Priestley, which I'm sure some of you might have heard of. He runs accelerator courses and is a serial entrepreneur. Now they have an assessment tool called the Key Person of Influence Report. And this is a fantastic tool that you can go to their website and take the assessment. And the whole purpose of it is to understand how much of an influence you are as a business owner, and how you can improve the way that you're using your own personal influence and your own personal branding to take your business forward. So this guides you through a number of different questions, to assess where you are across 5 or 6 different categories, to then give you a result and show you your strengths and weaknesses. And then through a very, very detailed 20-30 page PDF report, you're getting lots and lots of useful content to help guide you and help you improve. Now, the purpose of this is for a couple of different reasons. One, it's to help give you some fantastic content, which obviously going to help you with your challenges. 2, it's giving Dent lots and lots of very, very bespoke information about your particular challenges so that they can help tailor the products and services and the training courses and the accelerators that they're promoting to you. But 3, it's leaving you a really impressive and valuable perception of the brand as well. You're getting some great content, which is helping you with your challenges, all presented in a beautiful way, which is going to leave you with a really strong feeling. So it's going to help guide those conversations and guide your thinking. And there's just a little example here of the success that they're using. So they've got it on their website. They've had over 68,000 people take this test, and that's 68,000 data sets that they've got of potential customers with a really, really detailed understanding of their needs and challenges to help them direct their conversations. Another little example here of one of our clients, a financial director who works with SMEs. So Helen's got a report which we've created with her to help her understand and her clients understand her value, but help her understand the needs and pains of her target customers, who are typically managing directors and CEOs of fast growth SMEs. So again, it looks at 4 different topics: their results across vision and forecasting, across their business information, visibility and decision making, and it provides 30 pages of really tailored content based on that person's specific results to help guide them and help them understand how they can be better, but again, to help her understand how to really focus her conversations when she's speaking to those prospects. So I hope that kind of gets across how it works in terms of a system and the value to both parties. I'm just going to quickly run through that before we finish up. So the data that's provided and the content that's delivered through these assessments and unique reports helps every stakeholder in the journey, really. So it helps salespeople cover all of the different bases that we've spoke at earlier. So helping them perform a needs analysis really quickly, helping them improve the relationships that they've got and the conversations that they're having with their customers, and make that prospect to customer journey much quicker. It helps marketers, and this is why I got so excited about it, is because it helps us really drive targeted and personalized content to the right kind of people. It helps build brand awareness. It helps build value in our brands and helps really personalize the content that we're creating. But it's also a really great way to help demonstrate some return on investment. For a lot of professional service businesses, a lot of marketing is a lot around brand awareness. A lot of businesses are concerned about just doing marketing for the sake of doing marketing and not understanding what they're getting back. And this gives us some means to, one, be able to capture data in a unique and interactive way, but also deliver a lot of value and help us really understand the quality of the data that we're getting. From business owners' perspective, it means that sales and marketing can work together. We're both leaning on each other to provide the data that's helping both of us do our jobs much better. It's market intelligence that you own, so that's really important. I think we're building up a really detailed data set of some of the needs that professional service businesses are facing, and that's something that's unique to us. We're not buying it. We're not buying reports from other people that they're producing. We're constantly creating data, which is meaning that we can have some unique insight into the industry. And it's all around, helping us develop that thought leadership positioning. And from a customer and prospect perspective, and I think that's the most important thing, because it's not all about take. It's about what we're giving and the value that we're delivering, and the way that we can use this data effectively to create really personalized content, which is helping them with their challenges. It's a win-win situation, so they're not just getting generic content that's not targeted. They're getting something they're giving an answer to a question, and they're getting some personalized content that's bespoke to their particular challenge, which can only help them with their decision making and with and helping them see the value in the businesses that we're working with. So just to sort of sum up, the use of assessments in marketing is really an exercise in how we can improve the way that we build personal relationships. We can speed up that process through the data that we're receiving and also the value that the customer is seeing in the content that we're creating. And that can only help really in terms of helping us build better and stronger personal relationships with our customers, being able to speak their language and help them with their unique challenges they're facing, essentially. So I know it's a real whistle-stop tour and we've got quite limited time today, but if there is any questions, we're happy to open it up for a couple of minutes, because I know that the guys have got some more sessions to come up with, but if you've got any questions, feel free to put them through in the chat and we'll be here for a couple of minutes to answer them.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Mike and Lee there. I think that was really, really relevant. I'm sure it will be to a lot of people watching today as well. The challenge around demonstrating value and gaining buy-in. I think that was an interesting thing where we said, why buy and why now? Those are the kind of buttons that need to be pushed quite often in professional services. And yeah, seems like assessments and audits and reviews are an interesting way of doing that. So thank you again, Mike and Lee there. And as Mike says, if you do have any questions, and this goes for throughout the day, feel free to drop them in the chat, and our experts, our speakers will be more than happy to follow up either during today's conference or following on from it. Well, thank you guys.
Very good. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Our next panel, well, our first panel, I should say, is also featuring Mike Pye, in fact, and two other people. We've got Jay Cromat and Alexandra Kington, three people who I'm excited actually to speak to, because each of them has very interesting takes on the subject of personalization and targeting, from the functionality aspect of it right through to the ethics and how we can best apply it as professionals. So this might be something that you've been wrestling with in recent years, you know, especially with the arrival of GDPR and regulations such as that around tracking and personalization. And you might be wondering, you know, where that sweet spot is when it comes to personalization. How much is too much, you know, and how much is too little? And this is a question I'm going to throw straight over to our panel guests this morning. Guys, where do you think that sweet spot sits for businesses using personalization and targeting?
This is where everyone doesn't want to jump in ahead of anybody else, the beauties of a Zoom call. Well, I'll kind of jump in. I think personalization can be great, but it can also be detrimental to your brands if you get it wrong. So I think at the moment, marketers, so I'm an in-house marketer, I think we're treading that fine line between ensuring that we're getting the best ROI, the best conversion rates, optimizing those conversions, but also being mindful, respectful and ethical in the ways that we do this. There's lots and lots of tools out there at the minute that can allow us to personalize to a greater or lesser extent. But I think we're all on the brink of needing to be doing that in the right way, because at the moment, society and individuals, everyone's so divided. Everyone's in really different places, and the standard data that we can collect of, you know, gender, background, job profile, people have got so much more going on right now. I know we're not talking too much about the C word, but that really has changed people's outlook on life, people's perspectives. It's that adage of, you know, we're not all in the same boat, but we're in the same storm. And I think that will lead to personalization potentially having more pitfalls, because the inferences that we used to be able to make 50% accurately are probably lowering now, given that everybody is in such a different personal space. So for me, I'm a bit wary of personalization at the minute and the pitfalls that you can get into.
Yeah, I think I think the challenge with personalization is kind of, we call it within our business kind of the privacy paradox. You know, you've got, if you go out and you survey, say, 100 people, you know, 80% of them are going to say, yeah, I want really great personalization. You know, I want the organization that I'm dealing with to know who I am, to deliver the right services, product recommendations, and so on to me. You ask those same 100 people, do they trust organizations with their personal data? And 80% of them will say no. And there's this real challenge because, you know, to do personalization right, you need to understand a huge amount about that individual. Otherwise, as Alex said, you know, you can meet those ethical challenges where you might start making inferred recommendations to someone that could really offend them. And there was a great article, which I'm happy to share these kind of afterwards, within the Harvard Business Review earlier this year, where they did a full analysis of some of the third-party data that you can acquire, and using predominantly tracking data from cookies. And they actually calculated that guessing gave you a better chance of getting it right than the algorithm gave you from some of these significant models, especially around kind of predicting kind of male, female, and so on. I think it was only ever 44% right, which is crazy when you think, you know, it's a 50-50 call. So, you know, it's interesting if you're going to use personalization. I mean, especially with the way the ad tech world is working today, you know, it is about now organizations moving towards first party. And it was great seeing what Mike was talking about earlier. Yeah, it's around earning data from individuals so that you can understand more about them. And I think if you're going to use personalization, you need to be careful, you know, your approach to first party data.
So let's talk about that then. Let's bring Mike in as well there on that point, because you know, you mentioned there there's a nice little link. Mike, what do you think about this question? And moving on from it slightly, what are some really good or smart applications of personalization that you've seen, or smart ways of earning first-party data, like Jay says? Yeah,
I think just to add to it, I think I've seen. I think generally people are pretty savvy now, as they generally know that they're getting targeted. And that's kind of forcing marketers to improve what they're doing, and it's also kind of showing up quite quickly those that aren't using things correctly, and it's, you know, embarrassing people quite quickly. So just topically, just looking through my Twitter feed, for example, I regularly see people saying, screenshotting ads that they're seeing, and they're saying, why am I being targeted to this? You know, a really sort of blatant example of that would be like, you know, an advertiser targeting a male person with a whole load of dresses or something like that, you know. But just from a simplistic perspective like that, I often see people calling out brands saying, why are you targeting with me with this? You must have more data about me than this to understand that I'm not a relevant audience for you, and it's annoying me that you're showing ads that aren't relevant. So I think that's a big issue that brands need to understand, that there's so much technology available, so much ad tech, and there's so many ways that we can be hyper personalized, that you've got to get it right. One, for your return on investment, but two, for your brand reputation as well. And on the flip side, I think some people particularly like the fact that ads are targeted as well. Again, a friend of mine posted the other day to say, I know I've just been sucked in. That person is a marketeer as well. So I know I've just been sucked in by an ad on Instagram, but I've just bought this product and it's bang on, and they know what I want and I bought it. So yeah, it's a real juxtaposition of managing reputation with the value of hyper targeting as well. So I think just to go back to your question about examples of clever ways, I think a lot of the time it's not necessarily just being really clever, it's having a really deep understanding of the technology available, and having a really deep understanding of your audience. So unless you've got that, unless you've really gone through that deep exercise of creating personas about your individual customers and knowing their particular needs and challenges, then you can't really create advertising strategies that are bang on, because you're going to get it wrong unless you've done the legwork. It's too easy to make generalizations about people and serve them the wrong kind of ads. And the only way that we can really do that is by, I think, creating more of a relationship driven marketing strategy where we're working in tandem with customers and creating opportunities for conversation to help improve the way that and the content that we're delivering. Does that make sense?
I think you're really correct, Mike, on that deep understanding. But I think kind of unfortunately, talking from an in-house marketing perspective, you will get kind of senior people saying, oh, Facebook ads, let's do Facebook ads, let's do Instagram ads, let's do social media advertising. You're marketing, you can do it. And then there's this assumption, because it's simple to just, set up a Facebook profile, start doing these ads, that you can get something from it. But I think, as you say, they're so complex to actually target correctly and actually personalize correctly. And you need so much kind of sitting behind it to ensure success. Yeah. But then the platforms that you can use it on are so easy to use. So it almost lulls you into a false sense of security of, yeah, I can do a targeted Facebook social media paid campaign. That's absolutely fine and easy. And then the pitfalls can come. But as Jay said earlier, 44% of that is wrong, but that means that, the other 66% is right. And I think there's this massive thing at the moment that people, it's almost too easy to set off down that route without the proper knowledge of the tools, knowledge of your audience. And I mean, in most cases, it probably won't be too detrimental to your brand, but there's always that chance that it's that one person that, you mentioned about targeting dresses to men. It might be that person that you've targeted dresses and they don't identify as a man, and it's absolutely fine to do that, but you've made an assumption, and you can't make assumptions these days. It's not right. So there's a lot in there, but I agree that deep understanding, but that needs to be understood by more than the marketing team. It needs to be understood by the entire business.
Yeah, I think that the challenge has got, I mean, even the information commissioner doesn't actually understand how ad tech works. So they had to get, over 100 people from the sector into a room for them to explain to them what happens. And they've kind of given up on on actually finding out what does happen. From what I can tell, they've given up on taking ad tech to task. But I think the problem is it is so murky, it is so opaque. Just another reference point, only last week a piece of research came out from Pro Privacy, which found that over 80% of the top 100 charities in the UK had ad tracking technologies on some of the most kind of sensitive pages, around, dealing with 4th stage cancer, dealing with anxiety and mental health and so on. And this information is being freely given up by an individual because they don't understand that when they hit that accept all cookie button, that information was shared back to, literally hundreds of third parties that can actually use that data for harm. They can weaponize that data against you. You could have someone in a really bad place, and that data could be used to present payday lending, all sorts of things to an individual. And I know I'm probably dramatizing it slightly, but this stuff does happen. And I'm a marketer by background, and it's all about being pragmatic and doing it right. But the thing is, I don't think everyone does want personalization, but I don't think people necessarily understand enough. And I think on the theme of this, looking at the social dilemma, the great hack, they've been great things because they have started alerting people to what goes on underneath the surface. And the problem is most marketeers don't actually understand what goes on beneath the surface. They don't know how those ads are being recommended, those products are being the data is being used to kind of like on a cab, on an app for picking up a cab. It's late at night, the gait of the person who's walking in the street is a bit odd, which probably suggests they've had a bit too much to drink, so we're going to up the price significantly. It's that level of personalization, not just around ads, but also in terms of how it's being used in products. And really, for personalization to actually progress, I think ethical frameworks are going to be required within organizations to do the right thing.
Well, that's a really interesting point, and it kind of leads on to the next question. There's a couple of worrying sounding examples that you've cited there of personalisation. Do we think that, in light of things like that, dramatised or not, do we think that the technology and the discipline is unfairly maligned, or has it truly been a little bit murky and does need cleaning up? Like you say, potentially via ethical frameworks, codes of practice.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's always two sides to every story, and you know, if you look at again what came out of this, you know, this ad tech review, you know, there were brands like Unilever and P&G there, and you know, they're saying that in a way it's really important to them to have this information coming back to them so they don't wrongfully target someone. You know, so they want to know, you know, if someone is on, you know, an alcohol abuse website, you know, you don't want to be targeting ads about alcohol to them, but the only way you're going to know that information is for it to have been shared effectively. So there's always two sides to why you need this information. But I do think there's, you know, there are, the problem is people are kind of, just because, you know, GDPR and all these things have almost created what, you know, a bit of a consent fatigue issue. You know, it's this challenge that, oh my God, there's so many tick boxes I now have to go through. How do I get through it as quickly as possible? And that's causing a problem because people are just kind of willfully accepting all in terms of to get to the value without this understanding. And I do think, you know, the technology, I think it's a real hot potato because, as I say, it looks to me like the ICO's given up on it because, you know, it's such a big industry. So it will now come down to the tech providers to actually do it right. And this is what I mean around an ethical framework. It's not just around the brands, it's actually around the technology themselves doing the right thing. And as I say, yeah, ethical framework's probably the way forward on it.
Could that then almost be kind of self-regulating, that those companies that don't go with an ethical framework are the brands then that are kind of vilified and use it incorrectly, and therefore just by sheer bad press, you know, their figures decline, and those that do use it ethically and are gaining more users and gaining more positivity around their brand are the ones that stay in business? You know, because it's not all bad, is it? It's a good, when used correctly, like any technology, when used right, it can be really useful. So maybe there will, if, you know, the ICO is giving up on it, what do you think? Is there some possibility that, yeah, we'll end up self-regulating?
Yeah,
it's complicated, isn't it? I think maybe Mike might be able to shine a bit of light on this as someone who works with a variety of businesses. Is it generally the case that people's understanding is relatively low, or have you found any kind of common pitfalls that you've had to steer clients away from? Obviously, without naming any names.
No, it's interesting. I think Alex led on a really interesting point to start with, to say that, you know, often a request to try out a different channel might come from someone senior in the business who doesn't necessarily have the understanding of what they want to achieve and why, and it's like the new latest thing, and they just want to sort of get on the bandwagon and try the latest thing. Years ago, I worked in a business that worked specifically selling training products to a very specific demographic, and the CEO came in. This is just when Snapchat launched, and Snapchat was just being used by kids all over the place, and they were like, "We need to be on Snapchat. We need to be on Snapchat." I'm like, really? I'm not sure whether that's any of our audience is going to be on Snapchat, but just kind of wanted to use that as an example, because often it will come down to the fact that they want to try out a new channel, and then because they have a little limited understanding of how that works and how the targeting works and what good looks like across that channel, then it becomes really difficult to find someone to support with that. So when they're looking to agencies or freelancers or internal teams to come in and deliver that, how are they basing those decisions on? Who are they choosing? So it's quite a low bar to entry as well with digital advertising. You know, there's so many people out there who can go and learn how to do Facebook ads, for example. So if someone's coming in and saying, "Oh, I'll do it for 500 quid," and someone else is coming in and saying, "I'll do it for 10 grand," and how the hell does anybody know what good looks like, who to choose? Right? How do you know who knows the tech properly to deliver what you want to do in a way that's going to really add value to the brand. So I think it comes down to the fact that I think many of us, and I think I'll put myself in this bracket as well. Technology moves at such a fast rate; it's so difficult to keep up with it. And from a consumer's point of view, they really can't keep up with it. And like we were just talking about with regard to GDPR and stuff like that, and people just randomly ticking boxes to give away their data. We've gone through such a technological revolution where stuff is coming at us at such a fast rate, and we want it as well. We want instant access to everything. That's why Amazon has gone berserk. That's why Google has gone berserk, because they know how to create technology which delivers that dopamine hit that we need instantly. And because of that, and because we want everything yesterday, and we want a result in 1 second, and if it takes 5 seconds to go through a form to give away our data, we'll leave, we'll go through it, and people are just ticking boxes, and we're randomly giving away information without giving it the thoughts. And I think that's just a massive challenge, and I don't think that we're going to overcome that. It is down to the tech companies to overcome that for us by being more ethical, but whether they will do so or not is an impossible question, because they're making billions of pounds. So yeah, it's a really, really tough question that I don't think I've got the capacity to answer.
Yeah, I kind of refer to kind of the giving up of data a bit like the dating game. You don't jump in on day one or on the first date and basically ask everything about the individual. You have to build up that information, that picture of an individual over time. And you don't jump in and just make a whole load of assumptions about them either, which is kind of what the tech does today. Day one, that person looks like this, they therefore must be like this. And I think, if you treat the data, I call it the data game, is a bit like the dating game. You go in on day one and you ask a question, and you progressively build, and you kind of enhance and enrich the profile about an individual over the time of them engaging with you. And a bit like you were saying earlier, Mike, you can build up a much better picture, a more engaging, and actually build trust as well by doing that, because you're actually exchanging with the individual. If you give me this bit of data, you're going to get this in return. And it's kind of the contextual side of giving up data. So, and little bits of information build trust, and it's about transparency. I mean, if you look at GDPR, it is one of the fundamental principles is right to be informed, in telling the individual why I need your data and what I'm going to do with it. And again, I've shared with the panel, and I'll share with other people this report on data ethics by the World Federation of Advertisers. They actually state in that trust these days is a massive thing for the Y gen. They expect, or Z gen, they expect the in organizations to be doing the right thing. In fact, they're more likely to forgive them for their product not being right than if they found out they were an unethical organization. And a 1% increase in trust actually relates to a 3% increase in value. And doing that right, and kind of personalization plays a big part of that trust. If you're talking to me about stuff that I want to engage with you about, I'm more likely to trust you. And if you're telling me why you need my data over time, I'm more likely to trust you. So I think there's, I get really excited about personalization. I think it's the right way to go, but it has to be done at the right way, and actually, having someone's preferences, really understanding what they want to hear from you about is important.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting point. I think that's where I've seen clients and other businesses use it really effectively. And it comes down to not having a one-size-fits-all approach to the ad set that you're going to deliver to this audience. It's having a really detailed strategy about that basically that funnel, about how you're going to take people from a wide number of people through to a core number of people that may have the potential to do business with you, but through taking them through a journey where you're learning about them, delivering something of value, learning about them, delivering something more of value. So to put that into context, one business in particular we worked with had a target audience, delivered an ad set to them, which was asking them about whether they experienced a particular challenge. The next part of that was getting them to watch a little video which helped them with that challenge, no selling whatsoever, just helping them with the challenge. The next part of it was remarketing to that audience to deliver even more valuable content. And there's about 4 stages to this, constantly remarketing, giving them more content, to the final point where we then invited them to an event where they could go and learn about something in even more detail. So all of that funnel was around identifying a need, delivering value, to the point where they could really build up an engagement with that group and give them something that's going to really help them, as opposed to just like smashing them with ads left, right and centre, which are just designed to try and get them to buy something.
And that sounds like the best approach, really. It sounds to me a more considered and detailed approach, rather than, as we've discussed, these kind of one-size-fits-all buckets of people, is the way forward. And I think that is even more relevant in the professional services content, where if you link that with assessment-based marketing, as you were talking about earlier, you can start to mine that data and that knowledge about the audience, pre-personalization. I just want to touch quickly before we wrap the panel up. There'll be something. It sounds to me like there's a lot of confusion. You know, the ICO is unclear. My esteemed co-chair on the creative and digital committee, Steve Kuncevich, periodically keeps me updated with goings on from the ICO. I have no idea what he's talking about most of the time, and I think sometimes they're a bit muddled too. So there's bound to be confusion amongst marketing professionals. What can we do? What should we do? And also, like, we're always hearing different things about the law and about technology. So I just want to, as I say, before we wrap up, just briefly bring in a mention of DuckDuckGo and browsers like Microsoft Edge, where tracking cookies and third-party cookies are kind of off by default, and it's a more first-party based experience. So for the people in the audience who are, you know, even further behind than me and the ICO, where do we see the impact of this sort of leveling out? When are we going to see an end of third-party cookies, and therefore things like personalization and retargeting and stuff? You know, what's the latest?
Yeah, I think I mean, you know, Google are saying that they're going to be blocking third-party cookies from 2022. You know, the cynic in me says that, you know, the only people who are going to get powerful from doing this are the effectively is the gaffer. You know, they're gonna do very well out of the fact that they're blocking third-party tracking cookies. I think where's it going to go? We're already seeing a lot of the publishers are moving to kind of authenticated environments where you have to log in. You have to be an identified individual. That way they can do more contextual based targeting to the individual, both based on what they're reading, and it's almost like we're going back to the good old days, but, you know, linked to the articles that are being read, but also linked to the information that they can kind of generate from that individual first party data about their preferences. So it is going to move far more back towards a first party data model, which is why, you know, as marketeers, everyone really does need to start thinking about, you know, the quality of their first party data and what they have and the data they're earning and how they're bringing it into the mix. I mean, there are, again, I've heard of lots of other new technologies that are coming to the market to kind of replace the kind of like the cookieless future. But when you scratch them, you know, they still feel unethical to me. You know, it doesn't feel right. And I think often, you know, I'll say to my clients, you know, the question is, if you explain to your grandmother across the table what it is you do, does it sound creepy? And if it does, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. and the thing is, most of these technologies that are coming in as a kind of like a, you know, from a kind of to replace this cookieless future, do sound a bit creepy when you scratch the surface. So again, it comes back to the ethical frameworks, you know, if and the brands are the ones who are now driving this. And if they're going to start challenging their tech partners to actually really understand how it is they do what they say they do, and And if it sounds creepy and therefore they're therefore not prepared to buy it, then I think, you know, it will mean it will drive the industry and the sector to start looking at far more ethical, transparent solutions that actually I think in the long run will deliver a much better experience both for the individual and for the brand themselves.
Fantastic. And it's that's a really good note to end on there. Thank you, Jay. And thank you to Alex and Mike as well. It's a fascinating topic. It's one we could discuss all day, probably. I know that Jay could write about it all day, having read his emails. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, these guys, particularly Jay, you know, experts on this. So please do get in touch via the usual channels if you have questions or you'd like to speak to any of our panelists throughout the day. But once again, thank you to Jay, Alex and Mike. I think at this point, we're going to take a short break according to the agenda. We're running ever so slightly behind, just 7 minutes, which is good by my standards. So let's break now shortly. I think Nicola might pop a little placeholder on the screen for us to remember where we are. And there it says coffee break. Go and refill your cups, nip to the loo if you want. And I'll see you in about 10 minutes. Okay, folks. Hopefully we are suitably recharged. Cups full of coffee, empty bladders, etc., etc. We hope you're enjoying today's conference so far as well. It gives me a lot of pleasure now to introduce David Judick from Virgin Money, who've very kindly sponsored today's conference in partnership with Pro Manchester. And David's going to tell us a little bit about the story of how Virgin Money has responded to the challenges of this year, and come through to introduce something called Brighter Money, which you're going to tell us more about. So I'll hand over to David. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Dan. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thanks all. So, crikey, I joined just at the tail end of the panel conversation, and I think it was good to hear a little bit about ICO and GDPR. That's one of my daily challenges. I can't remember a day going by where I've not had an argument with our data protection officer. So clearly a fun topic. Just a bit about myself. So I'm, as Dan said, David Judick. I head up marketing and digital design at Virgin Money. I want to try and share some of the experiences that we've had over the last 12 months, I suppose responding to the challenges posed by the pandemic and the impact that that's had on the market and our own position in the market. Clearly, conditions changing very rapidly. And then a little bit about how we've tried to take some of that adversity and turn it into more of an opportunity by using the Virgin brand, which is, as Dan mentioned, has led to just a couple of weeks ago us launching what we're calling our Brighter Money bundle. So I'll get to that. But first, a little bit about us, just in case you don't know too much about us. So Virgin Money UK today is a combination of two businesses that came together at the tail end of 2018. So Clydesdale and Yorkshire Bank and Virgin Money. We've got around 6.5 million customers. And the intent of bringing the businesses together was to try and create an appropriately sized challenger to try and shake up UK financial services a little bit. We think we've got quite a unique role to play in that we're quite a large, established, full-scale bank, but we are a lot smaller and nimbler than the real heavy hitters. So we think through the brand, through the power of Virgin, and the fact that we're full service, and the fact that we're sizable enough, we think we can really make some inroads and offer customers an alternative choice. But to get to that position, we've got a fair bit of road to travel down. So bringing together two businesses with very different customers, very different colleagues, very different brands, and creating one entity out of it isn't easy. We're in the middle of a 3-year rebrand program with a view to, in effect, taking every customer, all of our systems, all of our brands, and condensing them down into a one unified Virgin Money UK brand. But as part of that, I mentioned colleagues, and we've got to try and land a single culture if we're going to be successful. We come from a place where we had very different cultures in play within Clydesdale and Yorkshire, depending on whether you were in the heart of Glasgow or you're in the heart of Leeds for the Yorkshire business, and likewise in Virgin Money itself, which had different cultures in play in whether it's Norwich, in Chester, or over in Newcastle. If we're going to be successful, we need to try and forge a single brand identity, try and create a purpose, I suppose, for the organisation where everybody's solving for the same thing. And then through that, we hope we can then achieve our ambition of really shaking up UK financial services. So one of the first things we did, I suppose, to take us on that journey, it's a setup, I suppose, for the rest of the chat, is try to define, with the help of about half the colleagues in the business, so around 3,000 colleagues, what we thought an appropriate purpose for our business could be. And our internal purpose is making you happier about money. I suppose what that means from our perspective anyway, it's about making colleagues happier about money. It's about making customers happier about money. It'll be about shareholders being happier about money, but trying to drive a culture and a purpose which infects and informs every single decision that we take. With then Brighter Money, which again I will get to, being the customer facing manifestation of that purpose. So what does some of this stuff mean? So ambitions for 2020, about halfway through the rebrand, we wanted to try and give Virgin Money a voice. There's always a risk when you go through something quite big and transformational that your brand goes a little bit silent, and we don't want that to happen. So around halfway through the rebrand program, we thought we would have done enough of a change, certainly for our kind of customer facing, certainly the retail personal customer space. Enough of our products would now have the new Virgin Money brand and be in the Virgin brand tone of voice to justify going back out to market and giving a voice to the Virgin brand. Our plans to do that would have involved quite a heavy investment in quite traditional marketing activities to land the brand messages through national TV advertising, quite sizable marketing pots to support that ambition, try and lead towards a step change in customer growth, real gear shift in that, but equally try and drive up awareness of the brand and, most importantly, consideration of the brand. Very, very important if we're going to build long-standing relationships with our customers rather than just attract customers through kind of monoline product offerings. But clearly COVID hit. So COVID put a massive spanner into our plans for 2020, as it did for a lot of our customers, as it did for a lot of our colleagues, and not just an impact for Virgin Money as a brand, but an impact for the Virgin group of brands as a whole. So those listening couldn't have failed to see the impacts on travel, the likes of Virgin Atlantic and Virgin Holidays, even through to the likes of Virgin Active Gyms have largely been shut in most regions of the country since the pandemic started. So the brand itself has faced an unprecedented hit. So suddenly the voice of Virgin Money wouldn't just be important for Virgin Money, but quite important for the Virgin Group as a whole. But we couldn't just continue. We couldn't just relaunch in a market and go in with our size 9s and spend a huge amount of cash on the brand at a time when customers were starting to feel a huge amount of stress, whether that is, I say, our personal customers or right the way up to some of our larger corporate businesses. You know, we're not blind. We could see that there were job losses happening. There was significant reduced income. Some business sectors that we dealt with had a complete cessation of income in some cases. And naturally, as well as that being an impact on customers, that's going to have an impact on us as a business, whether it's our growth projections or even our own costs or impairment lines. So we needed to try and find a way of looking at what was important for us. So one of the first things we had to embark on was a fairly ruthless prioritization exercise. What are the things that are going to define the success of Virgin Money in 2020, but also for the coming years? And I suppose there's a few things really. One, clearly continuing the rebrand as an enabler for all that we want to do had to happen. But equally, we needed to find a way of giving Virgin Money a meaningful voice so that customers looked at us and thought that we could be there to help and we could do something different to what other banks did. We know what the situation was during the last financial crisis. I know the situation now is a little bit different, but banks didn't come out of that looking too good. And the last thing that we would want is for banks, and us in particular, to come through the pandemic and the associated market impacts also not looking too good. But it's easy to say, well, we could ruthlessly prioritize and we could look at what we needed to do, but we had to face into what was happening on a day-to-day at the same time. So situation we're in, we had colleagues who were kind of customer-facing colleagues who were classed as key workers. We had a number of our operational areas classified as key workers. So we had to try and keep our stores open. We had to try and keep our contact centres open, but clearly with reduced hours and reduced capacity. You couldn't have the same number of people going into a store and queuing, for example, if that's what they wanted to do, because you had to have social distancing rules applying. We had different capacity in our contact centres. You couldn't have people sitting next to each other. You had to have an appropriate gap between them, especially inside a room cooked up in a building all day. We had a significant shift of non-customer facing colleagues having to work from home, which placed an unprecedented pressure, I suppose, in our technology. We're not used to having people logging in remotely. They're normally connecting directly to our systems. So a huge amount of strain was suddenly put on our IT, which we needed to manage to make sure we kept the lights on and keep trading for the sake of our businesses. And then on top of that, we also had a raft of colleagues who couldn't perform their usual duties. So it could be that they should work in a store, or they should be going into a contact center, but maybe it was because of social distancing, and maybe it's because they were in a higher risk category. You know, they're pregnant, for example, meant they couldn't come into work. They were suddenly stuck at home. And until we found a route through some of these technology challenges, they couldn't actually help. They couldn't do their usual job. And that was very, very, very frustrating for some colleagues. But despite those challenges, I suppose the tee up here is by focusing certainly in the rebrand space and what we thought was important, we've kind of been able to pretty much deliver what we thought we needed to deliver. How? One product at a time. We've not tried to do everything in one go, one journey at a time. We've had to get comfortable with what that means for customers who don't stick rigidly to one journey, and customers who have multiple products with us. It means at times they've had different brands they're interacting with, but it's been the most methodical, and I suppose metronomic feels like the right word, the kind of tick, 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 tick of delivery to make sure that we don't stall what is the key enabler of this kind of rebrand journey. But again, that's all well and good, but it doesn't give Virgin Money a voice. And one of the key things that we did want to do this year was still to give Virgin Money a voice. It would have been wrong to continue what we were doing. It would have been wrong to pursue large-scale advertising. I mean, the practicalities of large-scale advertising in a pandemic anyway probably make that unrealistic. But we wanted the brand to be talked about. But there are opportunities that come from adversity, and there are opportunities, I suppose, that come from the pandemic. You know, we could see that it was really hard for our customers to speak to us. We could see that was a problem right the way across the industry. You know, contact centres swamped with calls, and yet operating on reduced hours with reduced staffing. And it was kind of just at the time that everybody needed to speak to somebody about their money. We could see from sentiment on social media, we could see from the sentiment of the feedback we would get from calls when customers did speak to us, that stress levels were going through the roof. Again, back to that point of reduced income, lost income, complete cessation of income for some business owners. And then we had these colleagues who were stuck at home, unable to help. So we kind of thought if we could find a way of solving that, that might just give us something that offers value to customers. And through that, offers some value to our colleagues. And through that, actually helps to differentiate the brand a little bit. So I suppose it's because of those observations, and it was because of those challenges that we set to work. And over a number of weeks, we developed a new brand-led experience, which some of you may have seen, hopefully some of you have seen, called Money on Your Mind. So Money on Your Mind, what is it? Service designed to connect customers to our financial experts who are stuck at home. You may be thinking, well, that's genius. That's what a store does every day. That's what a contact centre does every day. I suppose the slight difference for us is we wanted to try and open up a new channel, a new opportunity for people to speak to us, whether they bank with us or not. So kind of swimming against the tide a little, that when other banks were maybe going a little bit quieter, we're trying to make it clear that there were long waiting times. We were basically saying, come and speak to us. How are we doing that? Really simple. Again, we utilize some existing feedback technology, like Net Promoter Scores technology, just to create a simple mechanism for customers to submit a question. You go, great, that kind of thing isn't new. But I suppose we put that front and center of our digital experience. We set it up quite quickly and connected some of these colleagues who were stuck at home. We could do that because we didn't need to go through our secure infrastructure in the same way. So it was easier for them to connect from home. And we could actually analyze the kind of questions that were coming through, again, for sentiment, but also to try and make sure that we could feed questions to the right people first time. And by doing that, reduce the stress of customers who, when we do speak to them, they then find out that they're speaking to the wrong person and have to be passed elsewhere. We launched a service dead quick. We got it live on social media initially, asking that to be the route. That was the situation for a couple of weeks. Then we introduced this question answering platform. We connected about 20 colleagues to it. to see how it worked. But then over a number of weeks, that grew to over 300 colleagues. Such was the appetite within the organisation to get involved, to really muck in and help out for the benefit of our customers. We also spotted through the questions that were coming through that there were quite consistent themes. The topics would start to change, but so we thought we'd try something different as well for us as an organisation, but used quite a lot by other organisations, which was we started to film some of our colleagues at home. Well, we got our colleagues to film themselves at home with a good Virgin Money brand wrapper around it, giving their own responses to some of the most popular questions, hosting them on YouTube, and then pointing to those YouTube videos from the pages where the customers could submit a question. Again, why would we do that? Well, if a customer can get the answer direct from us and direct from our colleagues without having to speak to them, then great. But equally, if they still want to speak to us, then they can. And I think the impact of that we're really proud of in a number of ways, I suppose. So one, we're really proud of the speed with which we managed to get the proposition developed, implemented, colleagues connected, and customers supported. In addition to getting to, say, 300 colleagues over around 3 or 4 weeks, we got over 50 odd videos created and published from people who were not used to being filmed, but delivered in a pretty natural way. We managed to do that across personal customers and business customers, so it wasn't just certain segments that we could answer. We have thousands and thousands of questions submitted and responded to really quickly. Delivering a really strong, what we call SMILE score, which is our version of Net Promoter Score. So it was a really key measure for us to make sure that customers are finishing the calls or having the responses and they're feeling happy. Otherwise, how can we deliver on our purpose of making you happier about money? And the videos that we did create were seen over 10 million times. So again, the brand starts to have a voice and starts to have a reach. Now, hopefully, if this works, Dan, I might just pop back to you for a second to play one of our introducing the Red Team videos, which is from our SME experts.
Hi, I'm Diora and I'm from Glasgow. I'm pretty new to the Virgin Money Red Team, however I have to say I'm loving being a part of it, getting to answer all of your questions and work along some really lovely people. That makes my job a lot easier.
Hi, my name is Graham. I live in Lincolnshire and work in the bank's Nottingham office. I've worked for Virgin Money for the last 17 years, 7 of which have been within the health and social care team. And what I absolutely love is helping people to grow their business.
Hi, I'm Hannah and I'm in Bolton. During the coronavirus, I've been asked to come and help out on the Red Team to see if we can help answer any of your questions that you've sent in to us. Part of my day job is going out to customers in their business premises, seeing what they do and seeing how we can help them to grow and expand their businesses.
Hi, I'm Oliver. I live in Chesterfield on the edge of the Peak Park with my family. Most of my day is taken up supporting the team of relationship managers that I look after in the south of the country, who indeed in turn look after their customers.
I've been with the bank for around 7 years, starting off as a tailor and working my way into the business segment. So that's why I'm on hand here to answer your questions. I do have a bit of experience in the field and I'm enjoying being able to help you as much as I can.
Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a feel for what Money on Your Mind is. Now that was, I suppose, one of the introducing questions. It's not directly answering questions that customers have submitted, but even from that, you can see a range of approaches from some of our customer-facing colleagues. It's not natural to them to be presenting. And one of the things I enjoyed most is as the videos evolved and as the questions evolved, you started to see some people really shine in this kind of new skill. And one of the people not in that video who's based down in Cardiff, I won't be surprised if they have a new career in TV. So if anyone's interested, go and check out the YouTube channel for Virgin Money, look at some of those videos and see if you concur. But, you know, Money on Your Mind wasn't a big, brash relaunch, clearly. It had to be much more of a slow burn, both in terms of how we delivered the proposition, but how we then responded to customers. But we felt it was a service that tapped into the DNA of Virgin as a brand. I think especially things like hyper relevant content. So when questions started to come in about furlough, for example, we were able to respond really quickly with our interpretation of furlough in video form. Like easier said than done in a bank. The amount of compliance, legal, data protection, less so in this instance, hurdles we have to get through to get comfortable that what we are saying is fair and representative is a challenge, and it slows banks down a lot. But through Money on Your Mind, we managed to take a big leap forward on culture by getting people to think about what we were trying to do and why, and accept a little bit more risk maybe, which given banks are in the business of taking risks is no bad thing. We managed to push our people forward as the key differentiator in the brand. Again, you may have seen other adverts from the likes of Barclays, Halifax, etc., doing something similar with their staff. I think there's two things that are different for us. One, well, we're pleased we got there first, but two, it's the energy it's now given us in terms of how we're going to evolve our own customer experiences going forward. You know, through the fact that we've given Money on Your Mind a voice, we've given Virgin Money, the brand, a voice, we then started to give the Red team a voice, which is now how we refer to our customer-facing colleagues, whether they're on live chat or whether they are operating in a store, whether they're dealing with customers opening their very first bank account as an 11-year-old, or whether they're dealing with high-end corporate lending. We're trying to start to refer to them as a Red team and set that as, I suppose, a threshold that people need to jump over if they want to be part of the Virgin family, because we want our experiences to really stand for something. The other part of the slow burn is then about how we've taken it to market. So we didn't go in with a big brash kind of campaign. We had videos on YouTube. We started to use social placements a lot more, which again, we hadn't really done very much, although other brands had. And bit by bit, we started to crank up the handle. From July, August time, we did put a little bit more of money behind it, a fraction of what we would have done from a relaunch and moving into more traditional marketing, kind of outdoor ad placements, etc. Why? Again, we wanted to give the brand the voice, but we also thought we could do something really relevant for customers, and it gave us quite an interesting way of targeting some of those placements. So, for example, we could see that the amount of money that the proportion of spend that people were spending on food was going up. People were having to go to supermarkets more. In fact, one of the few places they could go through during the first round of lockdown. So having ad placements around managing your money when people are feeling stressed about finances in the vicinity of supermarkets, or around bus stops when people are catching the bus to go to those supermarkets, or in place, that all becomes very relevant for us reaching the kind of customers that we needed to reach. Not to start a banking relationship with, but to let them know that we're there for them if they need to speak to somebody about their money and their stress. So Money on Your Mind wasn't our thinking for 2020. I think it just became a natural consequence of what was going on, and I think it's become so successful for us as a brand, and a real rallying call for the brand, that it's something that's now come from nothing to become one of our key brand experience pillars. But I think another thing I just wanted to touch on is how we did it, because it was pretty tough. You know, looking after a marketing team and looking after a design team, running creative sessions over a video call is bloody hard. Not something I'd ever really had to experience before. Forging new relationships with people, constantly asking for favors from people across the bank to get stuff done, that's really hard over video. Actually managing people's well-being, when you can't see the hours they're putting in, when you can't see the stress lines on their face because you're not seeing them all day every day, that was hard. And I'm not going to pretend that we've answered all of those questions. I think we've got a hell of a long way to go and a hell of a lot still to learn about managing things like that and getting to a kind of best practice. But one of the things we did do and introduce for the first time, and I suspect some of you might roll your eyes a little bit now, but we finally took a leaf from the Agile working book and tried to introduce some of those practices into our marketing approach. So, you know, assembling small squads of people, or a small squad of people, based a little bit on attitude and a little bit on the skills that they bring. Running daily stand-ups and scrums, running weekly sprints, setting very clearly defined tasks for what we wanted to achieve, but by doing that, enabling the likes of me to just stand back a little bit and allow people to come up with the answers themselves. It's a real shift for us, and I think it helped us make a lot of progress. We definitely didn't put every single foot in the right foothold, but we put most of them in the right place. I think one of the other things it enabled us to do, especially when it came to well-being, was, and apologies for the line from WWE, but it felt a little bit like WWE tag matches, when you would tag folks in and out of the squad. If people were just getting a little bit fatigued or you needed a slightly different skill set, you'd just tag people in and out of the squad rather than just waste time on meetings after meetings after meetings. And it worked, right? I think the proof is in the pudding that we managed to get Money on Your Mind out there. We managed to get it live. We managed to help a hell of a lot of customers. And we even noticed, despite a small amount of spend, an uptick in brand consideration, which is quite a tanker to turn. So it's a really pleasing outcome. And what I'd say as well is success can often breed success. So because of that, we set a new challenge. One around how could we make Virgin Money famous for current accounts, but not through a huge amount of brand spend, instead through the kind of smaller scale spend that maybe a startup would have. And again, to do that, we need to deliver lessons of this kind of squad approach for Money on Your Mind: focus, innovation, creativity, pulling in people, whether it's from digital design, whether it's customer testing, whether it's media planning, whether it's legal, whether it's risk, etc., to come together to try and work out what we could do to try and create a little bit of fame around current accounts for Virgin Money. And I suppose the hypothesis for us is how could we pull on the power of the group to try and create something that was appealing to customers, that would stand out from the crowd, drive growth, and get a little bit of chatter going. And I suppose through that chatter, create that little bit of fame. So our response to that, fingers crossed some of you have started to see it, or if not, you've maybe heard about it on things like Martin Lewis's TV show, is our Brighter Money bundles, which is going to be an approach we're adopting for at least the next 9 to 12 months, where we will regularly refresh and introduce a new bundle of proposition to customers who want to start a current account relationship with us. So borrowing, stealing some of the language of retail, some of the language of the mobile phone industry, which is something we think as a Virgin company we can do, but always try and have three things. So one, hero a core product feature of the banking product. In this case, we're starting with a 2% interest rate because it's relevant and it's important. Two, try and offer a distinctly Virgin welcome. In this case, a crate of Virgin wine. And boy, has that got people talking. It seems to be getting a lot of chatter everywhere, which is great. And then three, add a little bit of Virgin Sparkle. And again, starting off with some special and exclusive offers from our partners at Virgin Media. But then also, given where banks can be, where we can get criticised quite a lot for only offering things for new customers, trying to make sure that every element of the bundle has an equivalent existing customer offer available too. And that's worked really well. So we're really pleased with how that started as well. We've got people talking. We've had a step change in growth, 2, 3, 4 times the growth that we'd seen. We're really starting to drive value. And say as the bundles are live and they're going great. So what's my summary? Well, Brighter Money bundles didn't start out in our plans. Money on Your Mind didn't start in the plans. We started with an ambition to give Virgin Money a voice. Through big, bold TV advertising, progressed a rebrand. I think the rebrand has continued, but the pandemic has helped us, I think, to appraise what really makes us Virgin. It's helped us deliver something very different for our customers, which makes us stand out. It's helped us really accelerate the cultural change through what we're doing with our colleagues. And I think it's really helped us to prove why it's a benefit of us, these different businesses coming together for the whole benefit of the organisation. We've ruthlessly focused on the priorities of rebrand, giving the voice to the brand. And I think it's this kind of stuff that's helping us to become uniquely Virgin Money, which is great. We've got a way to go. We're not promising we're there yet. We're not promising we're in a position to shake up the status quo, and the market is tough and it's changing every day. I suppose the key learning for me is that we've got to keep watching, listening, thinking about what our customers need. Otherwise, again, the good start that we've had this year will quickly we'll lose pace on and we'll start to stall. But because of what we've done and because of what the colleagues have done and how our customers responded to what we've done, I think we've got every reason to be confident, every reason to believe that Virgin Money is on the way to becoming a proper industry challenger. And fingers crossed, and apologies for the cheesy last line to finish, but fingers deliver on our purpose of making customers, making you happier about money. So thank you, that's me. Hopefully that's roughly to time. I've probably gone slightly over, but thanks for listening. I hope it was helpful.
Thank you very much, David. Excuse me. Thank you very much, David. That was, yeah, wonderful and really interesting. You know, I'm fascinated to hear how a big organisation like Virgin Money approaches a relaunch and a rebrand. And when you throw in a pandemic into the mix, you've got a real year on your hands. So well done. And thank you once again. And thanks to Virgin Money for sponsoring today's conference. Next up on the agenda is our esteemed Chief Executive, Sam Booth, who's going to be hosting a panel about regional identity. Whether you're native or adopted Mancunian, you are in no doubt, you know, going to be unaware of the identity that the city's got. You know, that often trotted out phrase, we do things differently here. And certainly Andy Burnham was doing things differently when he was standing up to the government a month or so ago. So you know, we've still got our little niche in the world. To discuss with Sam this topic, we've got some really good guests. Christian James, who's runs the IF agency and is also chair of the MPA. Great friends of ours. We've got Lisa Morton from Roland Dransfield PR. And Sophie Parfitt from AO. So I'll hand over to Sam.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. You've stolen the majority of my introduction, but that's okay. Yeah, as Dan said, we are going to be talking about regional brand identities this morning. A subject that's really close to my heart, obviously being the chief executive of a business called Pro Manchester and a trustee for the charity Forever Manchester, two very strong community-based businesses and brands. So yes, today I'm joined by Christian, Lisa and Sophie, as Dan has already said, and they're going to be talking us through the importance of regional identities, what impact they have on the region and its economy, and what the commercial power they hold for local brands and businesses. Now, before I do hand over to the panel to introduce themselves more formally and in a bit more depth, I do want to say that I do want to encourage the audience to get involved in today's chat. So you've got the chat function down at the bottom. Please post your questions in there and I'll do my best to incorporate it into our conversation. Okay, let's go. So I think we'll go over to Christian first. Christian, will you please just give us a little bit of information about you, your role at the MPA and the IF agency?
Yeah, hi Sam, hi Lisa, hi Sophie, and morning everybody. So yeah, my name's Christian James. I'm the MD of a data-driven creative agency called IF. And we are based in Manchester. We've been around for 14 years. I am also chair of the MPA, which is a non-profit association representing media, digital and creative businesses in Greater Manchester. So that's me.
Brilliant, thank you. Lisa, I'll come to you next if that's okay.
Thanks, Sam. Hello, everybody. So I'm founder of Roland Dransfield PR. I set the business up nearly 25 years ago now. In Manchester. We've got an office in London, which we set up just before the pandemic, which was fantastic timing. And they were about to announce a partnership with an LA agency, which we're about to announce just before the pandemic too. So that's been postponed for 8 months. We're very much at the heart of the Greater Manchester community. I also sit on the board of the MPA, and we've been actively involved over the past 25 years, making relationships, making collaborations and being at the heart of the community. And our business is about really helping people to create profits with purpose now. We're working a lot with businesses that have got deep social consciences, or we're helping them to find them if they've not got one already, because we think that's a piece of work that's more important now than ever.
Brilliant, thanks Lisa. And Sophie, I'll just come to you please.
Hi, morning everybody. I'm Sophie, I'm head of marketing at AO.
So I look after all of our brand strategy, advertising, social content side of marketing, and AO, for those who've not heard of us, we're an electricals company, kind of grown out of appliances. AO stands for Appliances Online, although we don't talk about that because we actually sell a lot more than just appliances. At its heart, a Bolton born and bred business. We've also got a central Manchester office, and yeah, the kind of northwest is very much the home of that business.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think we're certainly going to come to talk to you about that sort of the ownership of that sort of the Manchester brand a little bit later on. But before we do that, I think let's give some context to this. And Christian, I think you're going to kick us off, aren't you, really? And just tell us a little bit about what is a regional brand. Give us some sort of set the scene for us, if you will.
All right. Well, I'll do my best. So I think within the context of what we're going to be discussing today, there's probably two, maybe three areas that are relevant here. Firstly, when we're talking about regional brands, and particularly with the businesses that are on this call today, we're probably talking about businesses that have an authentic regional personality, and those personality traits are genuinely embedded in their brand. There's also those businesses who want to trade in other parts of the either this country or the world, and they will adopt either adapt their brand to better trade and be more connected, more engaging with that specific region that they're attempting to do business with. So that's kind of one area. I think the second area is then, and absolutely I think prescient for today, and kind of like in about 10 minutes when we find out in the tier lottery where we've landed, it's about the regions that we live in, and in particular Manchester for us in terms of its identity. And I think that's more about the strength of the culture within a region, and the depth of feeling and buy-in and belief of the people that either work there, live there, or have a sense of belonging to it. Now, we're talking about Manchester, and there are 38 of them across the world. A little bit of research. There's 38 Manchesters across the world, and I don't know whether we've got any prizes, but anyone guess how many are in America? Well, the answer is 34 of them, but this is the original of all of them. So I think we're talking about, there's two different aspects of this. There's the strength of the regional brand, and then there's the ability and the authenticity with which brands then associate with that regional brand, that are very, very relevant for us today, and seemingly becoming more relevant.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll tell you what, if we don't come away with anything else today, that is a really, really useful
It's a factoid, yeah.
Absolutely, I'm going to use that a lot when I talk to people now. What do you think then, just so because we are talking about Manchester obviously today, I think we are going to talk on a broader scale with regards to regional brands, but what do you think the Manchester brand is? What are the values that sit behind that? Okay,
you gave me a little bit of advance warning on this, and I absolutely capped myself because it's such a massive question. But there's been some brilliant people who've looked at this question before. I mean, from a personal point of view, we moved up here as a family when I was 10, and I've been to school here. I went to school around in Manchester, moved away, worked abroad for a few years, but when it came to time to settle down, family, and sort of build a career, we chose Manchester. And it was around the time that Peter Saville had coined the term original Manchester. And whilst there have been other sort of descriptions, that one really resonates with me, the idea of the original modern city. And I think, our agency has spent 14 years helping brands to develop, as the sort of previous guy from Virgin Money was talking about, finding their voice. We've been, that's very much what we do here at the IF agency. And when we look at the brand voice, we're very much evaluating it on rational and emotional sort of cultural levels. And original modern, I think it stacks up on both rational and emotional. The rational side of things, there are so many firsts that this city claims to, really important, globally significant firsts that the city buys into, whether that's the, going way back to the sort of progressive corn laws and the ability of that the city gave for anyone to do trade here. Didn't matter what your background was, didn't matter whether you were male or female, and those at the time were incredibly progressive. So there's a real originality in that, and so there's a sort of there's lots of rationality. And then of course there's the graphene, and there's the baby computer, and all that really clear rational identifiers. But the emotional side of things, the cultural side, the personality traits are also incredibly strong. And I think, we as a collective have a strong affinity with them. It's a place where innovation and enterprise, technology and commerce has always lived hand in hand. And that creates, I think, whilst London maybe, and I hate sort of using it as a reference, but it's massive and it's on our doorstep. London is a great place to work, no question. But if you want to live in the best city on the planet, it's Manchester. Certainly for me, anyway.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more either. That's exactly my thoughts. And to be honest, I think actually we're probably a slightly biased panel, because I do believe that we all believed in that. And I think Lisa, you're a sort of shining example, really of this as well, just with regards to Roland Dransfield, as you told me the other day, is just about to hit its 25th year. So you've been working since it's so those 25 years about building that brand, and certainly the sort of stronghold within Manchester. How have you seen the Manchester brand develop and evolve over those years?
Well, when I first started in Manchester, actually my first job was on Salford Crescent. I worked for a one-man band. I managed to get a job when there were no jobs to be had. And when you looked out the windows, all the buildings were black. And we were kind of coming out of post-industrial decline, and we had Strange Ways riots, not much else. We had a fantastic music scene and some good clubs, and that was about it. There were no decent jobs. There was certainly no investment, and we weren't on a world stage. But despite that, there was the brand, and Christian's talked about some of the things that Manchester stands for, and there was honesty, warmth, that community, collaboration, resilience, and that incredible sense of humour that Manchester's famous for. In 2020, kind of 30 years later, we're in a situation where I believe that the brand has evolved, but I believe that your brand is basically intrinsically linked with your values. So if your values stay the same, then your brand stays the same, but your offer changes. So in 2020, we're obviously coming out of a major economic slump. We're trying to, yesterday, I was on the launch of Sir Richard Leese's business sounding board, the Economic Recovery Plan. And I would just say, if anyone's feeling despondent today, and we might feel even more despondent in a few minutes when we know what tiers we're going to be in, but read that report, because you will feel better after reading the report. Because what the report shows is the fact that the asset base that we've got now as a city is, we are on a world stage. We have got the resources that we need. If we remember the resources we had post-COVID, we've still got them now, and we've got a really clear route map forward. So we should all take comfort from what is in that report. It's based around collaboration, it's based around urban realm, it's based around health and innovation, and it's all about keeping people in education, retaining jobs, creating new jobs, and it's built around the sectors that we've got. Technology, we've got an incredible arts and culture sector, arts and culture, technology, and all that kind of stuff. So we're in a good place, and still our values are resilience, collaboration, confidence, grit, determination, and we've still got a sense of humour despite everything that we've gone through. So for me, that shows you that if you keep your values at the heart of what you do, your brand will stay the same, but your offer can differ over a period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a couple of certainly that aspect of collaboration, and we've just got all three of us discussed this on our call in the run up to this, was that collaborative element. And there's a couple of initiatives that have come out of the recovery plan that I know you've been a real driving force behind. So I'm just going to use this opportunity actually for maybe talk a little bit more about the 1GM campaign, which is obviously the Greater Manchester one, and also the United City campaign. Two huge campaigns, but it's about that collaborative element, isn't it? And it's about businesses supporting everybody else within the city regions and the Greater Manchester region as well, and what they can do to help businesses and people get through this really, really tough unprecedented times.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what we've got as a city, and other cities in the UK and across the world, acknowledge this, that we've got an amazing collaboration between public, private and also voluntary sectors. So that's a privilege to work with. I mean, we set up the United City with a group of us from that sounding board. So Gary Neville, Chris Oglesby from Bruntwood, Will Lewis from OBI, Frank McKenna Downtown in Business. And that group enables us to have an independent voice from the politicians. So it means that we can say stuff that doesn't necessarily chime with the stuff they've got to be saying. And obviously we've all watched the conversations and the messaging from Andy and Sir Richard, and they're quite different across GM and the city, Manchester as a city centre. What we're doing has been kind of ratified by both Andy and Sir Richard, because they acknowledge that we can be a bit edgier with our messaging, that we can call for stuff that they perhaps can't call for. I mean, clearly, it's going to be a private members organisation. We were overwhelmed because we launched it, and within 24 hours, we've now got over 100 members. We've got over £250,000 of the funds pledged, and those funds are going to help us to put research into place. We're working with Metronomics, who are probably the cleverest people I've ever come across, and they're Manchester based. So evidence around health data, giving us confidence as a city that we can actually bring people back into the city centre safely. It's also around lobbying business leaders to do that. I think if you're a business leader, working from home looks very different to you in Alderley Edge than it does to an 18-year-old apprentice who's got about an inch between the bed and the desk where they work every day. So that's really important from a health and well-being point of view. So we're trying to navigate that so we can message the fact that business leaders can bring their people back into the city centre, even if it's at 50 or 60% capacity, and they've got a duty to do so. Government can't necessarily say that. So that's behind a lot of the work that we'll be doing. And part of those funds that we've raised will be to contribute towards the 1GM fund. So 1GM, we launched with Andy a few weeks ago. It's still finding its feet at the moment, and we're working around the infrastructure, but essentially that's a hardship fund for people in GM, our community of people, individuals and businesses who've fallen through the cracks in terms of what the government's handed out in support. So again, got private and public sector working together to try and give the economy the boost it needs, get people back in the city centre, and also make sure that we look after everybody that the government isn't.
Brilliant, thank you. I think for me, and when it comes to sort of regional brand values, it's kind of the 3 C's, like commitment, collaboration and community are really kind of the integral parts of what Manchester is all about. And Sophie, I'm going to come over to you in a second, because I really want to talk about sort of taking that wider and overseas, and actually, but I do want to talk about Roland Dransfield and the We Built This City podcast, because that is very much all about, it's embedded in the Manchester regional identity. But from a business focus, what was the reasoning behind that, and what kind of an impact has that had on you as a business and that identity that you've created there?
Well, I came up with the idea, it was last November, I was ill in bed, and obviously you don't have the luxury of being ill. So I kind of, at that time I thought, I was just thinking about how much Manchester has given to me personally, and it's been, it's more than I could have ever asked for. So I wanted to find a way of being able to retell those stories around the kind of amazing Mancunians, we say born, bred or adopted, who put the heart into Greater Manchester, and there's loads of them. I mean, we could never cover all of those fantastic people. But it was to celebrate that, and then also to try and dig into some of the stuff that you wouldn't necessarily ask about. So about people's values, how did the relationships they created help them do what they did for the city, and what legacy do they want to leave? And they're all things that are very important to us as a brand. we came up with the idea, and then we launched it literally as we went into lockdown. We couldn't have predicted what 2020 was going to look like, but it was even more relevant, I think, because of all of those values that come across in that podcast. The feedback has been that that's given a lot of people a lot of hope. It's reminded them, it's reconnected them with the city they couldn't even go into. People were missing the city, they couldn't collaborate. And so to hear those stories, I think people said that they felt very much that every week when one came out, they felt that they got that injection of Mancness, I suppose. And it's been downloaded across the world. So it's really clear there's a lot of Mancunian lovers around the globe. But as a business, I think what it's done is emphasised where we stand. It emphasises the fact that we've been at the heart of that for 25 years. And although it was never done as a new business builder, it was done as for my kids to when I'm long gone to go, and Mum did some work that we could relate to, I suppose, because I'm not sure they can now, but it has definitely put us at the heart of Manchester. And ironically, in lockdown, we lost over 50% of our business overnight because of a lot of the work we do is in the sectors that shut down. And this has actually, even though it's a lot of work on top of what we were trying to do, it's brought so much more business to us, and particularly businesses from actually around the world and also from outside of Manchester who see that Manchester is that launch pad that they want to build back from, and they're coming to us because they feel that we've got those connections and relationships and understand the fabric of the city.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I can identify with that, and that's brilliant. And it is about attracting, retaining that talent and interest in our city region. And I know the panel after this one are sort of going to take this to the next level. We're talking about the creation of those regional identities and how we put them on a global scale and market Manchester on the international stage. Sophie, you're not born and bred Mancunian, but you are an adopted one. So I just want to talk to you perhaps a little bit about kind of the Manchester values and that identity, and whether this conversation really resonates with you with regards to your decision to stay here.
Yeah, absolutely. So my family are all Manchester through and through, but I was born down south and raised in the Midlands. But it was almost in some ways subconscious, but I think always there kind of in family values that Manchester was always kind of a homeland. So when it came to deciding on universities and then staying, it was almost not a decision, I think, because actually I probably found that I identified more with the city and the diversity and the kind of energy of people and the city itself, compared to anywhere else that I'd experienced. And actually sometimes I think it takes leaving a city. So I moved to Liverpool for 5 years and had a fantastic time and loved the city, but then you kind of start wondering, this isn't, never saw it as my home and never saw it as part of my future, and actually then, you know, start looking at moving back to Manchester and kind of take that's what part of what took me over to AO as a business. But yeah, it's hard to describe sometimes. Actually, I think the place gets into your blood. The people are there, and I'm a city fan at heart. You know, there was no choice about that in my family. So that's another reason to come and be close and experience everything.
Brilliant, thank you. And with regards to sort of obviously your role within AO, and AO being born and bred Bolton business, as you've already mentioned, how important is that you embed that sort of identity within the business, and how does it translate when we go further afield?
Yeah, it's really interesting thinking about it. It's almost, so AO's values are they're quite simple values. They're we care, we're smart, we're fun, and there's a fourth one that I always forget, but they're the three important ones. You know, that, like I say, they're quite simple values, but I think they're quite northern values at their heart. And actually, having those as our company values, that is what we hire against. That's what we look for when we're bringing people in, kind of at all levels. You know, if the most talented person doesn't fit those values and doesn't represent those values, then they're not right for AO. And that's kind of really at the core of the business. It's the people that drive it forward, and it's the people that make us different to a market where ultimately we sell the same as other retailers out there. But the core belief is that we do it better because we care about what we're doing. So yeah, it's just completely embedded into the business's identity, and even sort of being owned as we are now by a PLC and operating in quite a corporate manner, it's still, they've managed to retain that feeling, and it still feels like a family business. You know, it helps that we've got the founder as CEO again, but it's there anyway, and I think it's quite an unusual blend of a very large organisation that doesn't feel like a very large organisation, and I think that comes from the values that are there. And as we scale and move into other countries potentially, or other areas, I could see, you know, we can have offices anywhere, but that those values remain the same, and they're the Manchester values and the northern values that would never change, regardless of where, you know, where we're operating.
And so do you see that as a positive, in the sense of, you know, how other countries or certainly other regions will resonate, or, you know, kind of identify with some of that? You see it as a positive, only a positive for the business? Yeah, definitely. So, you know, the people caring about doing a good job is the right thing for the customer. So it's incredibly customer centric in our thinking all the way through the business. You know, we pulled back our marketing activity in the summer because we were selling so much that the delivery drivers couldn't keep up. So, you know, it would be very easy, we could have sold more, but actually the service to the customer was being impacted, and we weren't happy with that. So actually the business takes that longer term view that it's more important that we you know, protect the reputation of the company, and we don't overcommit ourselves, and some of that required kind of pulling back and not promoting ourselves as heavily when we're providing quite an essential product for a lot of people, and a service that they can't get elsewhere at that point in time. And I think that remains the same, you know, as the business scales and whatever market that we're operating in. It's that caring, I think, isn't it? You know, it genuinely kind of having that passion, and really believing that what we're doing is the right thing for the customer. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Okay. Is that, I mean, this, and then I'll throw this open to all of the panel, really, so I don't mind who wants to go first on it, in the sense that I absolutely get it. I understand that the feeling of community, of that collaboration, of that of galvanising the masses within Manchester, and us all getting behind that and feeling the value of being fundamentally a big part of all of that. But at what point is the tipping point, I suppose, is my question, in the sense that, should there be a pause for caution? Do we need to be careful that we don't go too far, that actually what it serves to do is to potentially alienate us and set us apart from perhaps the rest of the UK, or certainly the rest of the world in some senses? Christian, you've got your hand up, so you can go first.
Well, no, it's not. Finding out that we're in tier 3 is probably no surprise to anybody. I'm absolutely happy with the idea of Manchester being some kind of outlaw region at the moment. You know, not to get too political or show my anger and frustration too clearly, but this patronising and inept government have systematically penalised the North whilst protecting their own backyards. And I think it's like, the analogy I'd give is like having a school bully, and you know, we can either buddy up to the school bully, or we can look at the strengths that we have as a region, the talent that we've got within it, and we can have the confidence to go our own way. And so for me, I don't think there is a limit to the strength of the regional brand that we have developed, and its recognition on the global scale, let alone a UK-wide scale. We've definitely got the capabilities here, and we definitely have the right values. There is a relentless blend of hard work and ideas that you get in Manchester, and that, you know, the ideas are great, but you've got to have that passion, as the guys have been talking about before, and that relentless determination, and the sense of humour. I think, you know, you can. I don't think Manchester warms to people who take themselves too seriously, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful trait. You know, what's that line? You can walk with kings, but never lose the common touch. I think it was that's the If poem, hence I remembered it. So I think we should push it. We should embrace it, embrace the unique identity that we've got. It's absolutely relevant for the world that we live in today. That combination of the inquisitiveness and the open-mindedness, the collaboration and the community that we've got. So I think we should be pushing it as hard and as far as possible.
I couldn't agree with you more. Lisa, you were shaking, you were nodding your head. I don't know whether you want to come in and add anything more to that. I think you might be on, are you on mute?
I don't up my game with a proper microphone. I don't know how to use it. No, I mean, we've been outlaws for centuries, haven't we? So why change now? And I think if we change your values every time there's a different situation, then you don't have any values. And, you know, you shouldn't pick your values off the shelf or to fit a situation. So we've gone into this. Yes, we've had our wrists slapped, you know, because Andy didn't get us painted into a corner, and there's a price to pay. But wouldn't we rather pay the price than, like Christian said, give in to the bullies? And I think, you know, in actual fact, the values are the outcome, and we stuck by them. And we'll get through it, but we've stood our corner like we always do, and we wouldn't want it any different. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with more. And I think, I mean, I've never forgotten when I attended a conference down in, it was in Cardiff, actually, a City UK conference 2 years ago. And a lot of people heard that I was from Manchester. And the comments that they made only ever seemed to come from a sort of a slightly green-eyed perspective, or actually a very admirable perspective, in the sense of, actually, do you know what, Manchester just seems to get things done and it cracks on. And, you know, and you're very proud of the work that you do. And, you know, I think in that sense, I think absolutely we should be proud Mancunians, and we should be proud to stand out from the crowd, because, you know, we do it with honour, we do it with integrity and authenticity, all of those things that Christine, I think you mentioned earlier on before as well. So just very quickly, because we are overrunning on time. Is there any sort of classic examples, or for the businesses that are here and attending today, of who's done it absolutely right, and any advice that you might give to businesses to make sure that they can adopt the regional brand values and really kind of make it work for them and their businesses?
I think Sophie's I know she's on the panel here, but I think AO is a brilliant example. And Sophie, you know, you talk about that. I think it's absolutely about authenticity and relevance. I think it's about a natural embeddedness of that regional identity. The Warburtons have done a brilliant job over the years. You know, it probably only really started happening for them in terms of that clear association when Peter Kay brought the Bolton humour and kind of, you know, got it amplified out to the nation and beyond. But they're you know, it's bread at the end of the day. And I think this is the point for anyone who's got a business in a region and they're thinking, well, maybe we're trying to find our voice. You know, it's bread, it's everyday, it's down to earth, it's family. Yeah, and those are values that are absolutely rooted in the region, and therefore were very natural for the family baker, even though they are massive, you know, to develop and amplify through their brand. And it's the same, I think, when you look at, I don't know, Yorkshire tea is, for me, you know, it's another example where everything that their brand stands for and everything you experience with it represents the same values that are embedded in their region. It's that strength that they've got, and it's the yes, it's the no nonsense and the down to earth. The strength side of things, it's embedded in the product. You can't actually make a weak cup of Yorkshire tea. It's impossible. But that strength and that clarity and that pride is in the packaging, and it's obviously in all the communications. But I think you've got to be careful, and I think my sort of final bit, I'll bug off, is, you know, it's got to be distinctive. Your brand is, if you're looking for your voice, it's got to be distinctive. It's got to be relevant to the audiences you're influencing. It's got to be true. And that last thing, even, you know, more than ever, is the most important evaluation. you know, consumers have got the power now. They're sophisticated, they're smart, they'll smell bullshit the moment you post it. So, you know, if you're looking for your voice, that voice has to be genuine. If it's got a genuine Mancunian twang in your voice, brilliant, use it, and it will transfer across the UK and beyond very successfully. But it has to be relevant. There's no point in using that if it's not relevant to what you do. And I think AO have done it. I think AO do it brilliantly. So I'd love to hear Sophie talking about that.
You know, I think I completely agree. I think authenticity is the key to it. So I guess the way that AO do it is by embedding, as I said before, kind of embedding heartland northern values in, as you know, as our kind of, it's not even as our brand identity, it's our company identity and values. But the value is not to be northern, you know, it's more about, and I think that's what enables it to stay authentic. So actually, regardless of where people come from, they take in those values that are so important, allow that authenticity. I always think sometimes it's always easy to think of brands that don't do it as well, and I think sometimes just mentioning a city name kind of quite often just feels a bit cliche. It was a bit, you know, oh, we can do digital out of home now, and you can change them for whatever city it is. I'm like, so what? Actually, take it further than that, and those sorts of things. I don't know. It's a bit like when mail shots at first became a thing, like, I don't know, however many years ago, and it could actually have a letter, "Dear Miss Parfitt," and I'm like, it's irrelevant, the fact that you're referencing a city. Take it further than that. I think that, you know, brands that do it well, it's actually properly understand the people of the area that they're talking to. And I think if you don't understand that, it's a very dangerous game to play. You know, I don't think AO would ever change our values because we're operating in a different region of the UK, a different country. Yeah, the example that comes to mind at the moment is Uber Eats. I hear their radio advertising quite a lot at the moment, and it just irritates me that I've got a guy with a clearly London accent talking about Manchester, and with no context. I was like, it doesn't make sense. I don't care that you're mentioning places to eat in Manchester. Like, it just irritates me a little bit. But I understand why they're doing it. You know, that's their kind of wider campaign. They've got quite a distinctive character in their sort of overarching messaging. So I understand what they're trying to do. It just annoys me a little bit. I kind of think just mention national restaurants. It's fine. I know what you're doing.
That's it, and nobody tries to be fooled, do they? So let's face it, that's it. And I'm glad that you brought that people element into it, because Lisa, I think you'll agree with me that that's a fundamental part that underpins the recovery strategy that was launched yesterday. And I'm sure we can send around the links to the details about that. We are completely out of time. I've overrun. I'm getting told off from everybody. So just a quick thank you to Lisa, Sophie, Christian. Thank you for all of your input today. It was really, really, really great discussion. Thank you so much. My heart is bursting with pride with how proud we are of the Manchester identity. And I hope you all have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Can I just say, I wasn't telling Sam off. I was listening away quite happily there, but I can imagine she was receiving some chat messages to hurry things up. Nevertheless, thanks all of those panelists there. Really interesting talk. Now, as Sam kind of alluded to, we are going to talk now a bit more globally, but with still an eye on localization. It's literally going to be a talk about localization versus globalization. Should have just said that. We are overrunning. There's no room for waffling right now. Instead of carrying on like this, I'm just going to bring in one of my favorite guys, James from Midas, who I believe is hosting our next panel. Yes, there he is. He joins us from the stratosphere, where he's currently spending time. Over to you, James, for the next panel.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, really, really pleased to be here. really, really insightful panel, which hopefully this will follow on from that really, and hopefully give some topics for discussion. Again, as alluded to by Sam in her panel, please put some any questions you have into the chat. We'd be delighted to get people in as much involved as possible. So for those that don't know me, and thank you very much for that delightful introduction, Dan, I'll get you to do it again. I work for Midas, which is the inward investment promotion agency for Manchester. So we're charged with securing significant levels of investment for the region to create and safeguard jobs, but also to promote Greater Manchester on a world stage, hence why I'm probably chairing this panel session. So we've got 4 fantastic speakers, and thank you everybody for sort of going on. We've got Frank, Head of Marketing at AZO Network. We've got Phil, who is Senior Director of Immersive Content at Discovery Education. We've got Victoria Braddock, International Marketing Director at Marketing Manchester, and Louise Day, Assistant Director of Marketing at Manchester Central. Now, what would be really useful just to sort of set the scene here, just literally 30 seconds to a minute, if you guys wouldn't mind just doing a very brief introduction to those in this session who may not know your organization. So Frank, can I come to you first?
Yep, of course. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. So my name's Frankie. I'm the head of marketing from AZO Network. We are a marketing science platform specializing in science, engineering and healthcare. We originally came to Manchester via Sydney, via Macclesfield in Cheshire, and then we realized that we needed to move to Manchester. I'm sure we'll get into the weeds of why we did that later, but we've been in Manchester for 4 or 5 years now. And James and Midas, the team at Midas, have been instrumental in making sure that we met the right people, we were able to move into the right buildings and make the right moves generally strategically from a company perspective.
Great, thank you, Frankie. As if I've written that for you, fantastic, thank you. Phil, over to you next.
Hi, Phil Birchnall from Discovery Education, Senior Director, Discovery Education, part of the Discovery Network. Discovery Network, the largest non-fiction media company in the world, but Discovery Education also serves 53 million pupil accounts on a daily basis in 53 countries around the world as well. So just starting and basing ourselves in Manchester to establish studio presence here. And I'm personally Manchester born and bred, been working here all my working life in various guises.
So we got someone on the inside, as I keep saying, fantastic. Victoria?
Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm the Director of International Marketing at Marketing Manchester. So Marketing Manchester is the agency that is charged with promoting Manchester on a national and international stage. So we get to take Manchester to the world and deliver activity in places like China, the US, Europe, Middle East. So yeah, that's what we do.
And last but not least, Louise.
Hi there. So I head up marketing and communications for Manchester Central, which, for those of you that don't know, we are a Victorian railway station turned international convention centre. So we host events of all shapes and sizes from across the world, across the country. We're probably very familiarly known for hosting the likes of the Conservative Party conference, but also we've been the backdrop to the Ninja Warrior filming. We've done all sorts. So yeah, very broad range of events that come through our doors.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction. So my first question I'm going to go to is Frankie. As you alluded to in your intro, I've worked with AZO ever since you came to Manchester some 4.5 years ago, and the growth of your business has been fantastic and continues to be so, which is very promising to see. I guess with relation to sort of taking regional identities global and that whole local versus globalization agenda, what would be really interesting when I was thinking about this panel session is getting some insight from some companies that have sort of lived and breathed that to that extent or are currently doing so. So can you talk a little bit about how you've seen Manchester adapt over the years and sort of better position itself on a global stage since you've been here?
Yeah, sure. Funnily enough, when we moved to Manchester, we created a blog piece and a company update and press and the rest of it talking about how we're coming to Manchester to expand the team. And part of that blog piece was creating an infographic about the history of science and engineering in Manchester. So if you actually look back, it was 3 years old, but it's fascinating that we've got the first canal, the first intercity railway, the first place to split the atom. There's well, over the Industrial Revolution and then through to through the 20th century and now into the digital revolution, it's always had a history of innovation, which is one of our key values at AZO Network. And again, I suppose it's that kind of the cultural values which drove the decision to move into the city centre, because we got to, in East Cheshire, we maybe had a catchment area of 1 million people in Cheshire. But then we realised that, you move to Manchester and all of a sudden you've got access to 7-8 million people from around the northwest. We get people coming from Sheffield, from Leeds, from Liverpool. And it's ultimately that was the reason we moved into the city centre, was to attract, hire and retain the right talent. Because that's our biggest expense or overhead is the people, because we've got to attract the right people who represent the company and they're basically the mouthpiece towards the clients. So it's been an incredibly important strategic move for us, because we're able to go from, it ripples on throughout the company now, because we're able to increase. We're on a 26% compound annual growth rate for the last 8 years in terms of sales increase, and we've got big plans on the horizon as to where we're going to take the company next. And I can tell you I've only ever had one job, and it's been with AZO Network, and that's over 8 years. It's one hell of a journey that we've been on. But and Manchester has been right at the core of that, particularly in the last 4.5 years, as you say.
And on that piece as well, how have you found that move to Manchester has allowed you to sort of attract more clients in terms of your developing your pipeline and portfolios?
Yeah, good question. Again, it comes back to the people and like the culture of the company. And like I say, I'm a bit sort of biased almost, because I've only ever worked at one place in my senior career, and that's here. But the culture ripples throughout the whole company. We've just hired another 8 recruits, so that's a 24% increase in headcount. And just out of interest, like if anybody else has been hiring, it's been the talent pool. We've been flooded with an embarrassment of riches. Like one position I had 200 responses for, and we could have hired one of 20 people, but I had to go for, well, I ended up going for 2. So I went back to the CEO and asked for more budget, because now the talent pool of young, enthusiastic, driven, digital native talent is unbelievable out there. So with an eye on the next 1 to 3 years, once we get through COVID, we're gearing for some serious growth after that.
Fantastic, and thank you for that. And it's been a pleasure to work with you guys and continue to sort of support you guys in your growth plans going forward. And it's another great sort of success story in Manchester, and it's what I sort of wanted to bring to this panel. And so sort of moving on to Phil now. As part of this, huge brand of Discovery, which is a great brand, but obviously yourself being a Mancunian at heart, you've got that sense of pride, and sort of following on from the previous panel session, we've spoken about this in terms of the US side of Discovery perhaps not having that understanding of what Manchester is about. So can you talk a little bit, because I know we have offline, talk a little bit about that perception that there was historically, and sort of how that opinion was sort of altered?
Yeah, sure. So it was very interesting, actually, because when, to Christian's point, most of my colleagues think I'm based in New Hampshire. So, Manchester by the sea. So, I get meeting requests at, 10 o'clock at night and things like that. And it's taking some time to educate them. I'm in the original Manchester. And of course, they don't think we're the original either. But anyway, that's a whole other educative process that I'm engaged in. But when Discovery acquired my company, which was based in the Sharp project, late 2018, early 2019, with the intention of setting up an immersive studio, creation of virtual, augmented, mixed reality content. And we are doing that. But things changed rather quickly when our Chief Product Officer came to visit the Sharp project in Manchester. And within the space of an hour and a half of his first visit, he'd seen the world's fastest robotic high-speed camera-based photography, a world first. He'd seen companies that could spin on a sixpence and talk about all kinds of digital content. And he'd seen filmmaking facilities. He'd seen one-man bands, one-person bands, people innovating, people passionately talking about content, just people coming out of the woodwork everywhere, just interested to just sort of say hi and say, we can do this, we can do this. And within a day or so, we weren't just setting up an immersive studio in Manchester, we were setting up a hub, and we were shifting our development and production facilities, which are based in, been based for Discovery in Hammersmith in London for quite some time. And that's moving to Manchester. And of course, things have been interrupted, but those plans are still in action. And in fact, over the summer, we've invested in some SME based in Sharp projects as well. And being able to start that work regardless and actually make some films over the past 6 months. And we've made those films in a fraction of the time, and it has to be said, a fraction of the budget, of course, that other filmmakers would have done those things in. And what happened was that really what they saw was that Manchester it's like a massive Swiss Army knife. So when in New York, Chicago, where production is based, most of the production is based, and in Twickenham and in Hammersmith, what we found was that you get one company that can do this, one company that can do that, and everything very inflexible, and then you get a company based in Sharp, based in Arbita, based somewhere in Manchester could say, yeah, we make films. Oh, you're interested in podcasting? Yeah, we do that too. Oh, we can market that for you. Oh yeah, we understand social media. Yes, we do this, we do. And it would just be like, okay, so, and we get the benefit of all of that synergy, that work, that cross-working and everything. So it's been a huge, huge hit. And in fact, plans are accelerating. And as you know, I can't mention a name, but we now have one of the world's largest comms providers looking to invest a significant sum of money into some real world-leading immersive content coming over the next 12 months as well, which will be based in Manchester and will involve companies probably in Sharp in Manchester as well. So Manchester companies benefiting from this, which is really important to us.
Fantastic. And you couldn't really get a better segue into my next question to Victoria around sort of positioning on a global stage, then one of the world's leading, as you say, telecommunication companies investing in something in Manchester to sort of position the growth of a company the size of and brand reputation of Discovery going forward. So fantastic story, and thank you for that. So Victoria, I think moving on from that, clearly Marketing Manchester's role is to promote Manchester and market it as a thriving business destination and tourist destination. And I guess historically, leaning towards the previous panel, we've used the historical heritage. Frankie touched on it before around sort of history of innovation and the cultural values, etc. So, but actually, I'm originally from down south. Sorry for everyone on the call. But actually, I've even still got friends that talk about, oh, Manchester's just sort of music and football and that sort of thing. So it's about being proud of sort of that element, really. So I guess on that basis, how have you seen in the world of sort of Marketing Manchester and that whole destination marketing of the city region? How have you seen that message evolve over the past few years? And, this nod to our regional identity, is it recognized and does it matter on a global stage?
I think wherever we go around the world, we always get recognised for various different things, whether it's if we're in India, we get recognised for our industrial heritage. If we're in China, we'll get recognised for the strength of our universities. We always get recognised for the strength of our sport. The second thing somebody will say to you when you introduce yourself as being from Manchester, they ask you if you're a Man United fan. So in whatever market we go into, we're hugely lucky that people have some base knowledge of what Manchester is. So for us, it's always an upsell. So they already have some knowledge which is based on our sport, our academia, or our history. But then what our job has been over the past 25 years is to be making sure that we're positioned as a vibrant destination, as a place to live, work, invest and study. And I think some of our asset base has been on an enormous journey over the past 25 years. So if we look at what's happening in our universities, as a place to live, the city centre is we can see the tower blocks going up on a day-to-day basis. So for us, it's building on those baseline messages
and making sure that people understand the quality of life, and it's the vibrancy of the nightlife, it's the culture, so that we've got that balance. Coming back to Phil's point of being the Swiss Army knife of cities, we want to make sure that people recognise us not only as a fun place to live, but that you're also going to get a great job that's going to pay you well to ensure that you have the richness. And I think, you know, the cultural sector is also helping us tell that message globally. Things like Manchester International Festival, our art galleries, you know, things like Park Life, that all helps people to understand the quality of life and the vibrancy, and distinctively why Manchester and Mancunians, it's a great place to live. So yeah, we've got a baseline of knowledge which is always easy for us to build on, because we're not explaining Manchester from the start. So
yeah. And I know when we were doing a little bit of sort of, you know, pre-meeting around this, we were talking about sort of layering up with other thematics around some of the specific sectors that we have here of expertise. You look at sort of healthcare and life science, the heritage again of industrial and manufacturing, the e-commerce centre of sort of the UK. Also goes without saying, relevant to this audience, that the sort of creative and tech skills as well. But also we've also got things like, you know, global indices around the Economist Best City to Live. Surely that helps to push that messaging as well.
Absolutely. We undertook a piece of work last year where we looked at 500 indices and where Manchester ranked within them. So what we're looking at is a way that we can track our global growth, and also looking at specific areas that we want to make sure that we're being recognised in. So being recognised as one of the best cities globally for students. We're very high ranked for millennial appeal because of the vibrancy of the city. Being in Resonance best 100 global cities for us is absolutely brilliant. And there's certain indices where we want to do well, because that's coming back to the previous panel when we were talking about, you know, the whole fundamentals of what it means for Manchester. There are certain indices that we watch more closely, and we make sure that we're engaging with them so they've got the true picture of what's happening on the ground in Manchester. So yeah, it's hugely important that a lot of global cities are changing, especially the rate of growth in places like China, Middle East, India. You know, we could find ourselves slipping down those ranks if we don't actually make a concerted effort to ensure that people understand the benefits. And as we grow and recover from the current situation that we're in, they'll be even more important that we're recognised.
Yeah, so the messaging there is build upon what you have as a regional identity and what you have that works well, and then layer up going forward. A great message to go to the world with. Moving on to Louise, last but by no means least, great introduction that you've given around sort of Manchester Central. I'm sure the majority of the people on this session are aware of it, but I guess following on from sort of what Victoria said around, as I say, that marketing piece, clearly the city centre, the unique position that Manchester Central has as a city centre conference centre plays its part too. So how has that developed its own ecosystem around that, a different way of looking at those events piece and fringe activity, but also how has it managed to sort of help you to attract more prominent conferences here, which in turn puts more eyes on Manchester?
I think just picking up from Victoria's point around kind of key and high growth sectors and Manchester's performance in some of those sectors, and you know, coupled with that very closely is the strengths within the universities. From a Manchester Central point of view, when we start looking at attracting those big international events, actually the first thing that those international organisers want to know about is the destination. They want to know what the city has to offer. They want to know that actually, you know, is there synergy with what they're looking to get out of their conference programmes. And Manchester performs incredibly well in those realms. Particularly, I think you touched on, James, you know, those high growth sector strengths in relation to life sciences, biomedical, advanced manufacturing, engineering. It's those kind of hooks that really get people starting to talk about Manchester and its capabilities to host these kind of congresses. And I think, you know, second to that, then they want to know that there's a convention centre within the city and the infrastructure there to allow them to physically, logistically bring that event to the city. So that's why we, as the convention centre, work incredibly closely with Marketing Manchester, because it's very much a partnership effort in terms of attracting those big international conferences. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into identifying the right fit And part of that is kind of founded on what we call an ambassador program. So that's about kind of identifying some of those, you know, those academic, those real kind of leaders in their field that exist within the city that we can work with to then take that message of the city back to their respective networks and associations and get them to start talking about Manchester on our behalf and the value that can be generated from bringing their association congress to the city. And I think, you know, we can't underestimate the value that collaboration, you know, it's a theme that's come out quite a lot this morning already, but of the value that collaboration with our kind of public-private partners brings as part of that. And I think to your second point in relation to the physicality of where we sit as a convention centre, you know, whenever we're asked about what Manchester Central has to offer, be it to a national, local or international organiser, our location in the heart of the city is the one thing that really grabs people, because it's that connectivity, it's the ability to travel and the ability to get there, you know, easily. And Manchester's kind of transport network and the air routes and the connections that can bring people into the city plays a massive part of that. But equally, they want to know that there's the hotel accommodation within walking distance on the doorstep of the convention centre. And, you know, we talk quite openly about the fact that there's something like 2,500 hotel bedrooms within a 5-minute walk of the convention centre. There's over 10,000 across the city. And that's so critical to those organisers that are bringing their delegates to Manchester for 2-3 days. And they want to really create that kind of campus style environment because they recognise that's when they get the most out of their event. So it's not just about what goes on, you know, within the convention centre and the core conference programme. It's actually, as you touched on, it's the ancillary stuff that starts to wrap around that. So the fringe events, the formal or the off-programme events where people can start to get together. And I think that's where we see some of the really interesting, you know, results coming from conferences. It's the ability to kind of make those connections and develop them as part of the programme.
Yeah, and no, that's brilliant, and that sort of lends itself. I've got about 5 minutes or so left on this panel, so I'll start to wrap up shortly. But I thought it was quite relevant to bring Frankie back into that conversation. And short plug, Frankie has put a link to that infographic and that article on the chat. So if anybody's interested to look at it, it is really, really good. But on that, Frankie, Louise mentioned around some of those key sectors and, you know, playing on the heritage and the history and sort of the quality that we have in those sectors. Obviously life science and sort of materials and engineering are core to your business, so that will have had a sort of a huge attraction for you guys to sort of be based in Manchester.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's you've only got to look at Bruntwood, SciTech, you know, the sort of the networks available and the kind of incubators, the hubs. There's you know, Daresbury, Alderley, Science Park, City Labs. There's loads of them. I can't obviously remember all of them off the top of my head, yeah. But it's so we work heavily in well, anything in science and engineering or even healthcare, and it helps massively that, you know, we're able to go and host a roadshow down at the City Labs or one at Alderley Science Park or go to Daresbury and do that. And you've got access to that talent. I suppose that's all fed by the universities. You've got, is it 4 or 5 quality universities in the city, and it's incredibly important that, yeah, okay, I talked about the talent before, but then the client base is out there. We've got 420 odd clients, and we're looking to make, how do we make that 4,000? So that's the ambitious, hairy goal for us, and we're going to do that by getting, you know, closer ties with these organizations, with people like BioNow or Bruntwood SciTech, and yeah, it's incredibly important to have a close proximity, physical proximity to those organizations. Yeah,
and no, that's good. And I think just sort of one final point before I start to wrap up. I think to your point, you mentioned, Phil, around that, and it has been talked about on previous sessions and panels around that collaborative nature, around the fact that that is part of the DNA of what makes this region so special. You mentioned about potential plans going forward around some investment which might bring more collaboration to some of the more SMEs in the Sharp project, but also the fact that you're working with them. Can you talk literally for like 30 or so seconds around that?
Yeah, I mean, collaboration is everything. Yes, we've got the SME collaboration, but also I'm going to segue across a little bit, actually, just to what Frankie was saying, because with your help, James, we've been engaging with MMU universities, and that is absolutely fundamental, because they're not just outputting, they're listening, and they want to collaborate too. And that means that actually it's all about the pipeline of talent, the way resources are funneled into our sector is now far more intelligent, and that is huge, and everyone benefits from that. The SMEs we're working with, the universities themselves, and of course the young people moving through that pipeline as well into whatever careers they work with. That has really caught the attention as well outside of the UK.
Brilliant. And what a great sort of final point to finish on. So I guess the last thing for me is, and any of you can sort of answer this. Would any of you have any sort of particular advice on how either the businesses on this call or further afield can further enhance and further position and push Manchester's regional brand identity and some of the aspects that we've got further on a global stage? Yeah, go on, Frankie.
Yeah, just a real quick one. The talent pool out there is phenomenal. So I'd get into it before it gets hoovered up, and spare no well. Obviously, you've got to be able to afford it, but if you can take that calculated risk now, COVID's not going to last forever.
Yeah, I would echo that. Yeah, I would echo that, and also COVID is leveling as well, and it's a good thing that it is, because we don't want prices. We don't want Manchester to be seen as the place where you can do everything for half the price as you do it in London. We want things done at a fair price so that businesses develop at a fair rate as well, and COVID is leveling that.
Yeah, we almost made it through this without mentioning the C word, but yeah. Any final points from Louisa, Victoria, or shall I wrap up?
I just add to that, and sorry, I'm sure Victoria would say something similar, but I just add to, wherever possible, and notwithstanding COVID, encourage colleagues to come to Manchester, because I think once they're in the city, no matter for how long they're here for, they get a true sense of what we're about, and it does dispel a lot of those myths that are still out there, regardless of Manchester standing at the, as it is now. So yeah, just encourage people to come and experience a bit of what it's about.
I think I was just going to add the collaboration. I mean, that's not to be underestimated at all. Wherever we go in the world, we're always held up as an exemplar, because, in some cities, it can take you 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to even develop a network. And organisations like Pro Manchester are great at bringing people together and helping make those connections. Making those connections is fundamental to all of our success, and we succeed together as a team. And I think that's going to be absolutely crucial as we come out into recovery. It's going to be a hard job, and we will be more successful if we all collaborate and join together on a shared goal to bring even more growth to Manchester. And I think, once we get back into recovery, our growth will pick up where we left off. So that's what we all need to work together to do.
Great, and great final segue back to Pro Manchester, obviously the guys they organised this. So thank you very much for the panel session. Hope everybody found it useful, and I'll hand you back to Dan. Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you to the panel. Really, really interesting subject matter there, and fascinating as ever to hear from businesses on the front line and from James at very high altitude. We're going to take a break. We're going to take a slightly shortened break to catch up some time. So just 5 minutes this time. I hope you've got quick boil kettles. I will see you back here at, in 5 minutes. Okay, folks, that's our 5-minute break. I'm sure a couple more people will continue to rejoin us as we get underway with our next panel. I'm very interested to very excited to introduce another two of my favourite people, Martin Bryant from Big Revolution, and Steve Kuncevich from BLM, which is the solicitors. Now, as we all know, the UK government is leading the world in so many ways. One of which is the application of socially conservative web laws, shall we say. And there's something called the Online Harms Act, which is proposed, which seeks to make the UK the safest place in the world to use the internet. And to discuss whether that's a good or a bad thing, I'm going to hand over now to Steve and Martin.
Thanks, Dan. Hello. Yeah, we're going to talk about this online harms bill, which I think has been in the news quite a bit over the last few years, but you could be forgiven for not having really paid attention to it because, let's face it, there's been plenty of other things for us to talk about. So probably a good way to start would be, Steve, with your legal mind, if you could maybe tell us a bit about what the online harms bill is and what it's trying to achieve.
Thanks, Martin. Well, obviously news moves very fast these days and content and harm moves around the web very fast. And that's what the online harms bill, when it eventually gets here, is meant to be dealing with. Obviously, the web's part of our everyday lives now. There's a lot of areas of law that cover how you behave on the web, but then there seems to be a whole set of other harms that maybe don't have the same kind of regulation. And in the wake of a number of tragedies such as Molly Russell's death, and various incidents around Cambridge Analytica, the role of social media in elections, all that kind of thing, there's been a push for quite some time to be some kind of regulation of the web. Now, the web and social media is a global thing. As I say, there is some legislation that deals with it already, but the UK is going to try and be the first to introduce a legal duty of care to businesses with an online component to protect their users from a set of specified harms, and those harms are a number of different things, one of which is misinformation. And certainly in the alternative facts and the fake news era, that seems to be more relevant than ever. But we've seen a consultation, we've seen a response to that. Well, I don't think we've seen a response to that consultation just yet. There's a suggestion that we might see a bill in 2021, but there's also a suggestion that we might not see this regulation until 2023 or 2024. So it's a priority. The Lords have complained about the delay behind it. An awful lot of people are talking about the delay behind it. But we're just going to have to wait and see. It's coming, but what form it ends up in, I think, remains to be seen, along with when.
Yeah. So what do you think about this? Do you think this is a good way of controlling the internet? Do you think? Well, first of all, do you think it's a good idea to control the internet through legislation like this and to have a regulator in place to deal with it? Because one of the strengths of the internet for many years was that it was a wild west in a way, which in some ways was scary for people, but it allowed lots of different ways forward. And it feels like we're maturing now, and the laws are starting to come into place to try and hammer down exactly how things work. But it's a global web, isn't it? It's a global internet. So how will this work? How will the UK regulating things like online speech and behaviour work when, as soon as we go online, we're part of a world that is regulated by all sorts of different countries in all sorts of different ways?
That's a great question, Martin. And if I had the answer, I would be sat on an island guarded by ninjas, but I don't. And neither does the government, I don't think. I suppose I'm going to give you the best lawyer's answer I can, in that this isn't a good thing or a bad thing. It's a thing. And unfortunately, we've seen recently with the impact of, we've not mentioned the C word yet. I am going to mention GDPR. With the coming into force of the GDPR, we've kind of seen a bit of an outlier or an example of how this may work in practice, because there's going to be lots of gaps that need to be filled in, awful lots of guidance and codes of practice that are put out there into the wider world. Until we see them, it's going to be quite hard for most businesses to prepare. And there's a suggestion that under 5% of businesses, the only ones that really need to worry about this, but those that do are going to have to maybe think about having a harms person or a harms officer, the same way they've got a DPO or a data privacy manager. That might be what we see.
Yeah, and is this going to affect all businesses? Obviously, it's hard to say for sure, but is it your sense that, that all businesses are going to be affected by this, or is it going to be businesses that have like an online forum, or what do you think?
Again, that's all great questions. By no means, I don't think are all businesses going to be affected by this. Certainly, there's an idea that the legislative burden is going to be, or the compliance burden is going to be kept as low as possible. But a lot of the initial confusion around this was exactly what kind of businesses were and weren't in scope. And the idea that if all of a sudden you have a chat function on your website, you might need to be thinking about this, scares a lot of people. You know, we've had some input into white papers about this kind of thing before, and until we know exactly what the government wants out of this, all we've got is this kind of quite virtuous idea, but that's all a little bit nebulous. You know, not just which businesses are going to be in scope, but what the sanctions are going to be, what the effect of it's going to be. You know, we're talking about maybe fines, we're talking about powers to pull down sites and content and so on and so forth. And we're talking fines that could be enforceable against board members as well, although there may not be any criminal sanctions. So there are an awful lot of gaps to be filled in. The intention seems to be good, but quite rightly, you've got an awful lot of people that are playing into the response to it now, talking about what kind of impact this is going to have on freedom of expression, and whether or not it is going to curb freedom of expression in any way.
Yeah, there was an FT story a few weeks ago that the government were I'll quote from it now. Downing Street is pushing for big tech companies to be subject to a duty of impartiality to prevent political bias as part of legislation to regulate the dangers of the internet. And this is something we've seen in the US. There's a debate over something called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act over there, where a lot of American, especially conservative politicians, they feel they're being censored online, and the platforms would say it's more about restricting misinformation. Obviously, you know, around the Donald Trump presidency, there's been a lot of misinformation flying around, fake news and all that kind of thing. And some conservatives see that as censorship if, for example, there is an idea going around that the election's been fiddled, for example, and then social networks are saying this is not true or whatever, or blocking people, or hiding that information behind a warning message, etc. They call that censorship, and they're trying to regulate against that. And it seems like that idea has come to the UK as well. Is that something that could really happen? It feels to me incredibly problematic to try and limit, for example, political speech, where yes, you can say as a factual thing there that it's factually untrue that I don't know, vote observers weren't allowed to observe this particular count or whatever is clearly factually untrue. But then if you're, on the other hand, if you're then making a political argument about the national debt is unsustainable, it's down to perspective whether you think that's true or not. So I don't know, can you regulate that kind of thing, or are they just trying to chuck as many things as possible to try and control speech?
That's a great question. I'm sorry, I'm saying that a lot, but it's true. Are they trying to control speech? If you look back a while ago, when the Crown Prosecution Service started looking at communications offences and set out guidance to prosecutors how to deal with it, they said there is going to be some content that's just going to be iconoclastic or is going to be what you don't like, but that doesn't necessarily make it unlawful. And that's one of the issues here. I mean, there's plenty of criminal law, and that criminal law is being updated as well by the Law Commission as we speak. So that's going to talk about what you can and can't say to each other on social media. Looking back at the list of sort of defined harms in this, fake news and misinformation is only one of the 10 or 15 that is meant to cover, but understandably it's one that an awful lot of people are focused on. What I think has been really interesting from the platform's point of view is that you've seen changes in user experience all of a sudden to try and combat this kind of thing. And that's an example of the platforms and big tech working quite hard to do the job so the government doesn't have to do so, because they didn't want to be regulated. I mean, there's an awful lot of talk about big tech lobbying the EU's digital services agenda when that comes out in December to try and make it a bit more watered down. Their approach to this will be a bit more balanced. But you see, for example, I've seen all sorts of stats that suggest, any number of percentage of people just doesn't check an article before they share it online. You'll see on Facebook now, there are disclaimers all over the shop noting that, an article might not have been fact checked. You'll see on Twitter now, it seems like a small change, but when you retweet, it's no longer just a retweet. There's a pause, and you're actually prompted to add your own opinion to this. And as we've seen as well, an awful lot of tweets from no one in particular about election fraud have been flagged up pretty much immediately, and all of a sudden that particular timeline starts to look very different. So it is about a balance, and I think it's about the fact that, you know, the long-held description of social media is, you know, all of a sudden everybody's got a blunderbuss or everybody's got a loudhailer, and as much as the law's got to evolve to cope with this, I think maybe so do people's behaviours as well. And maybe the COVID crisis, sorry, I've said it, Brexit, any number of events over the last few years that have caused this kind of polarisation online, I think are helping to force that change as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the tech companies didn't want to be regulated. We have seen from Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, him actually saying, we don't mind being regulated. Regulation is good. And it's an example of how when companies get to a certain size, they then say, well, actually, no, we're fine being regulated, because basically they're big enough to take on whatever burden the regulation gives them. So if this online harms bill is quite strenuous to them in terms of things they have to suddenly start doing to comply with it, then they're big enough to cope with it. But also they know that they're maybe smaller competition that's just starting, and the new startups that are going to try and challenge Facebook. This is a great way to keep them down, because suddenly they might have far more compliance issues trying to keep up with this new legislation than they would. So it's an interesting turning point, I think, for social media in that way, where we're seeing at least Facebook, maybe Twitter is a bit more open to resisting this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting turning point, isn't it, in the story of these big tech companies?
Oh, it's fascinating. You know, they've always had to reckon with the fact that they're having to grow up in public and to do it fast. And we saw a lot of changes around what Twitter were going to allow in terms of using their platform for political advertising, for example. And there was a real tension between their approach and Facebook's approach to that, in that Twitter kind of went a little bit overboard about what they would allow around elections, and Facebook tried to have a hands-off approach for much longer. And then all of a sudden you've got Zuck and Dorsey hauled up before US regulators on a fairly regular basis, most recently because of complaints around, as you say, liberal bias. And then Donald Trump and other people's calls to repeal Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. But interestingly, in Biden's cabinet, he has at least one, I think, member of big tech that suggests that he's going to be open to a similar kind of approach. So whatever we say about this, and just to clarify, in terms of the scope of what this may well cover, it's any business that provides services or tools that allow or facilitate others to share or discover user-generated content or interact with each other online. That's a long sentence. But whatever we say about this, the direction of travel is towards regulation. And as a result, it's just going to have to be something that we get used to, but certainly something that the regulator, if it is Ofcom that regulates online harms, is going to have to work very hard to explain as well.
Yeah. Have you seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma? Because I think that's maybe shaped a lot of people's understanding a lot of a lot of these kinds of issues, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about kind of online harms, so to speak, that much in their everyday lives. But yeah, this documentary came along and really captured people's imaginations, even though for a lot of people they found it maybe too simplified in terms of how it was describing what happens at social networks. So yeah, what did you make of that? And do you think it's a useful way of understanding the debate, or is it maybe too simplified?
I thought it was a really great documentary, or I thought it was maybe an hour and a half of really great documentary and half an hour of really terrible shoehorned in acting pieces to try and make it seem relatable. You know, you've got to get, you know, people are smart, and I think I watched that back to back with The Great Hack one day because I want to be cheered up about the state of the social world. But I think this raises wider issues, doesn't it? Around, if you don't pay for a service, then you are the commodity in your personal data and your identity, and what you're doing to stay online is the trade-off for that. You know, the simple way of looking at it is, you know, a lot of people don't object to getting recommendations from Amazon for stuff to buy, because they know they're going to buy it anyway. A lot of people, arguably, depending upon who you believe about this, will accept their privacy being impinged upon for a richer experience. So it's definitely worth a watch, and it's a real eye-opener when it starts talking about how social media, and I think echo chambers as well, can start to affect your behaviour without you realising it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it alerts people to issues that maybe they weren't aware of, but it does simplify things a little bit. There was some of the ways they describe the way these networks work was a bit oversimplified, and certainly the social networks themselves have come back. Certainly Facebook has come back and said that a lot of this is based on outdated practices and things. But I still think it's important that people, as I say, understand this stuff, at least understand the issues, even if some of the detail in the documentary, or I say drama documentary, the weird drama bits, the people inside the social network saying, well, hey, feed him this now.
Yeah, well, exactly. You go from a kid who's on his phone too much to the next thing you know, he's in QAnon, attending a protest and getting arrested, and his entire family's in jail. I mean, yeah, but it does lay out the issue. I mean, I think maybe it made the mistake, but we're not going to get to a film review. But I think it maybe made the mistake of patronising the audience a little bit too much, unfortunately.
Yeah. One point that's coming from Luke Jeffrey: if we're going to regulate political speech online, we need to start by regulating political adverts. They're the only kind of ads where you can say what you like. It strikes me that advertising is already regulated separately, and it might not fall under this. What do you think?
It doesn't, and the ASA has made it very clear that it doesn't. And bear in mind, the ASA runs a self-regulatory system in and of its own right. But there is a suggestion that political advertising might be a bit more closely regulated in the future, certainly online, because as Luke quite rightly says, you can get away with pretty much anything you want to do as far as political advertising is concerned. And I think there was a real, when you're talking about fake news, when we see what's going on in the States, but in the general election, the British general election, we saw any number of fact checker websites really having issues with the fact that Twitter feeds and micro-targeted Facebook advertising and so on and so forth was being used to nudge people in ways that we hadn't seen before. You look at the sheer amount of spend that the political parties committed in the run-up to the last election to their social campaign. And it's probably something that they're going to have to look at all over again. There's an article, I'll see if I can get it while you're writing your next section, that I wrote about the potential regulation of political advertising going forward. But yeah, I mean, that we're talking about regulation generally in online harms, but I think we might well see more of that. And we might well see more of that in any number of different sets of circumstances where you've got offline content starting to move primarily into an online market.
We mentioned near the start about GDPR, and I suppose there's a parallel in this, in that it's something that businesses will have to get ready for, and there'll be a new bulk of regulation that they'll have to think about, and they might have to have an officer and things. But one thing I found about GDPR is everyone rushed to get ready for it, and then in the wake of that, there's not exactly been many fines issued. We've had some big ones, British Airways, Marriott, for example, but it's not like small businesses are getting clobbered by the Information Commissioner's Office. They're down the road in Wilmslow, and they've got their hands full with these big cases. Do you think this will be another one where it's a case of, oh yes, you're supposed to follow the rules, but actually chances are, if you fly under the radar, you won't actually get a fine?
You may, depending upon people's opinion, I think, and I'm going to try not to mention the four-letter acronym too often. Data protection, I think, for a long time, from 2000, when the 98 Act came, 2001, when the 98 Act came into force, saw privacy as something that would be nice to comply with. And there's actually been a legislative framework around privacy and data protection for years and years and years. And so people kind of knew what to expect when the GDPR came in. They just knew that the volume was going to be turned up and the sanctions were going to increase. This, I think, is a little bit different, because when you talk about a legal duty of care, that's normally something that comes about through years and years of court decisions where judges sort of build it incrementally over time. This is a new duty of care to prevent harm that's been introduced in one fell swoop by a piece of legislation. And as such, GDPR was the great unsubscribe tool that nobody ever wanted. You had loads of panic emails saying, please come back to us or we can never speak to you ever again. And there's been a couple of years since GDPR came into force where we haven't seen these massive fines, but they are starting to happen now. The biggest fine, I think, to date handed out was against Google in the EU by the French privacy regulator, of the fact that when you buy an Android phone, you're forced to set up a Google account, and to get to a privacy policy, you have to click about 10 or 12 times. That was 50 million euros. And we've seen some significant UK and EU fines since then. Interestingly, we saw one against Ticketmaster recently for not properly assessing the risks of a chatbot. So it takes a while before the regulators get their feet under them and have, you know, enough reasons to go after somebody. And they do look for examples. But in the case of the GDPR, the ICO gave people time to get up to speed. And I would imagine that Ofcom, or whoever the regulator is going to have to do something pretty similar. You may see lots and lots of scramble to comply. You may see lots and lots of consultants coming out of the woodwork saying, well, we can help you comply with this. But how it looks in reality, maybe 18 months, 2 years down the line, might be a little bit different.
Okay, well, we're going to have to wrap it up now, but just before we do, when do you think people will have to start thinking about this? Obviously, it's not all decided on yet, but is there a timeline?
Well, that's great. Again, that's another great question, Martin. There is a timeline. We're meant to see the draft legislation this year. Unfortunately, the current timeline is that the online harms legislation may not be anywhere near coming into force until 2023 or 2024. But what I would say is, where you've got an awful lot greater instance of people being willing to sue online businesses generally, certainly for data breaches, if they can see that this might be coming, you know, there will be a whole cottage industry around civil claims around this to get to grips with. It's worth looking at insurance. It's worth looking at whether or not you need to have all these online elements of your business running, and whether or not they're that much of a risk. It's like everything else, like health and safety, like data protection. It's a risk assessment, and there's no reason that risk assessment can't start now, because I think it draws out wider issues than we may see in this legislation.
Okay, well, so a lot to think about there. I would just like to apologise before we finish that I had this fancy mic set up in front of me and it stopped working one moment before we started. So I've been using my laptop mic instead, but never mind. But yeah, interesting stuff. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Martin and Steve. Really, really fascinating. Yeah, I think it remains to be seen if the implementation goes as well as GDPR and everything else the government does, then I'm looking forward to a really good law.
We're not shedding any tears over it just yet, Dan.
Good. So thank you again, Steve and Martin, both members of the Creative and Digital Subcommittee, and as I mentioned earlier, Steve co-chairs it with me. Now we are moving on to our final panel of the day. Thank you for hanging on. We're running slightly behind, but we're going to nevertheless try to catch up and finish up on time. One thing we always like to end these conferences on is with a bit of a look forward and a bit of an insight into maybe something on the horizon that people can get their heads around and maybe look into for the year ahead. And when we were doing this, we were looking at different things. We were looking at tech, we were looking at skills as well. And one area in which we saw those things come together is in UX and user experience design and user interface design, which there's so many prevailing trends that seem to relate that some of which have come off the back of the pandemic, some of which have developed independently. It just felt like a really relevant topic. And as luck would have it, we're very, very fortunate to have two people involved with a very, very exciting upcoming initiative program regarding UX and skills. So I would love to introduce, please, to join us, Dr. Kirsty Fairclough from Manchester Metropolitan University's School of Digital Arts, and Matt Harney from Academy. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Now, I know, Kirsty, hi, Matt. You've got to go at 1 o'clock. So actually, I'm gonna change the order a little bit and give you an opportunity just to hear more about the School of Digital Arts. And one thing that you wrote in particular was that you see the school's mission not just support through the pandemic, but to help create the next generation of digital storytellers. How do you see the university's role in that playing out? And what is it about digital storytelling and UX and things like that sort of justifies this kind of investment?
Sure. I think it might be useful if I just explain a bit about SODA, because not everybody is super familiar with SODA's mission and what we're attempting to do. So we open next September. So that's the School of Digital Arts within Manchester Metropolitan University. And essentially the investment has come from kind of half from GMCA and half from Manchester Metropolitan. And we're a very ambitious future media school. We are, as I said, opening next September in a new iconic building, which is right in the heart of Manchester's city centre of the campus, which is already a thriving area, as we know. What's exciting about SODA is that we are bringing together the notion of, well, things that Manchester's amazing at, which is innovation and creativity. And that's really the heart of SODA's identity. It's about future storytelling, about bringing multidisciplinary sets of skills together, almost like a kind of digital playground, so that there's a lot of industry connectivity, a lot of freedom for the students and for a business that we're partnering with to engage in kind of developing ideas and testing them out. So yeah, I'm really so excited about the whole SODA project, and we've got an amazing group of industry champions as part of our industry advisory group, and that's headed up by Oscar-winning film director Danny Boyle and by Nicola Schindler, who I'm sure many people from Manchester will know, who was the founder of Red Productions and has moved on to Studio Canal and some amazing TV production work. Yeah, so we've got a really exciting group of people who are kind of helping us shape the direction of the curriculum, and it's just that in connection with industry that's really important for us. And we're spanning UX, games design, games art, emergent technologies, film production, animation. Yeah, there's a kind of photography, there's a whole set of different subjects, but everybody works together, and that's kind of the main USP, that there is that multidisciplinary sense of collaboration, which SODA is really all about. And I'll shut up now because I'll end up using the whole 10 minutes.
Oh no, brilliant. It's really interesting to hear about, and yeah, as I say, very exciting. So
I would love to be involved in any of those. Animation, film,
one of those
video,
things. And right on cue, you mentioned it's got a really strong backing of employer advisory board, surrounding it, and people from industry, people from the creative industries, including firms like Apadme, Matt. So I wondered if you could just speak briefly about how the relationship, why this is beneficial to businesses, why you think businesses should support things like this, and how you think they can actually make the most of things like this.
Well, we've actually got a couple of our students enrolled on the apprenticeship courses at MMU. So straight away we've seen the value in this from the get-go. These particular people are already have some UX UI experience, but they've kind of sort of transitioned or pivoting from different areas. One particular one that is in my team coming from sort of VR design, that kind of stuff, kind of 3D things. So he jumped to this opportunity, and it's going to really improve his skill set. And I think the Manchester is becoming more and more, a centre for technology. If not, well, it already is, isn't it? And courses like this just become a great resource for people to learn and also go ideally straight into employment. The connections that MMU, I personally have benefited because I went to MMU. I benefited from the connections that MMU have to industry. And I went straight from a degree straight into Apadme.
Brilliant. And so I guess the question for both of you in a way, just to kind of really underline it, what do you think it is about these disciplines? You mentioned, Kirsty, how broad the teaching offering is, but they're all related to, a lot of it is visual arts, a lot of it is creative and digital arts. What makes that so important to and so relevant to people's lives, careers, and the economy? In just an easy question to kind of, just a light-hearted one for 10 to 1.
Well, for me, I think storytelling is at the heart of everything, isn't it? No matter what you do and what industry you're working in, you know, the notion of telling a story, whether that's you branding your business and you're telling that story, or, you know, you're working within the creative industries that are literally telling all kinds of stories. I think the notion of that is so important. And yeah, I think that Soda's in a really, really amazing place right now to really help not just, you know, GM, but also the region and kind of and the nation. We're thinking, you know, it's kind of putting that idea of future storytelling right at the very heart of what we do, and looking for the next kind of emergent technology. Just to give you an example, we've just recently been working with a couple of SMEs, one of which is Forever Holdings, on a project where it's kind of VR immersive storytelling project, which is we won £1 million Innovate UK funding to develop this piece of work that essentially works with, well, we work with Niall Rogers, who's amazing to work with, but to create an immersive experience so that you feel like you're talking to to him. So it was called the Audience with a Hero project. So that idea that new experiences, new ways of telling stories, you know, you can use that. Eventually we can use that to launch an album so that you can have a conversation with Niall Rogers and find out about his kind of creative process. So that idea of, you know, storytelling through a lot of different emergent technologies and existing technologies and blending those is really what kind of the whole Soda project is about. And that's a long-winded way of explaining it.
It's true though that multi-channel approach has been used in marketing for quite a while, really, hasn't it? I saw a case study recently of it was Jay-Z and Bing. It was like almost 10 years ago, where they used this incredible multi-channel thing where they published his book in all these different locations all around the state, and got people to go out there, generate user-generated content, and it was all brought together, obviously to benefit Jay-Z and Bing. But it was that kind of storytelling way of doing things. It just increases that personalization with the brand, and certainly from a UX and new experience now, it doesn't seem to cut it as quite as much just to be you know, doing user personas and getting nice user journeys. You know, it has to be backed up with that sort of personal approach. You know, that wherever the story behind the product or the service, if we can bring the emotion from that, you know, why this is being done, and getting that across to the customers, to the users, then that connection is a really strong bond.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to say that Soda's, you know, its industry connectivity is really, really important. So, you know, we're always looking for partners, anyone who wants to got, you know, ideas that they want to test out around that very broad idea of storytelling. What's amazing about Soda is that we have this way of a model, I suppose. It's called the collabs, where the entire, no matter what course you're on, everybody stops their kind of formal teaching and they all work together on a project. That can be, you know, it could be any industry comes in and says we need this product developing or whatever, so that we work together with the business, we work together with our researchers, our staff, and all of our students to get that really kind of amazing kind of range of different perspectives. And it's a place to also, you know, test out ideas and also fail, because you only learn through failing, and you know, it's the way we grow, isn't it? So yeah, that's another thing to ask, to kind of bring into the mix about Soda.
And it's very interesting. We've heard all day how storytelling is, you know, it's been one of the key themes of today's content, I think. And one of the ways in which stories are told is through the design of the user experience, you know, through design. So I was just wondering, we've noticed this year there have been, you know, some trends that have been a product of the pandemic, some trends that have been accelerated by it, some that have been slowed by it. But what do we think are going to be the abiding sort of legacy design principles that come out of, or customer experience principles that come out of the pandemic?
Go on, Kirsten.
I'll leave that one to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think almost from the get-go, the messaging in general coming from companies was more empathetic. It was more personal, and I think people were addressing customer safety and that of course is always going to build trust. I mean, trust is a really powerful thing generally in digital, you know, with things like privacy and things like that. It seems to be more and more of a thing that people need to be careful of when they're putting these services together. You know, we've just seen something talking about Facebook and Twitter, how they're handling that kind of stuff. But in this case, we actually have physical welfare. Companies have to take that into consideration. And I think being seen to be responsible is also a very important thing. The wider implications of that for your brand is important. We've seen a lot of businesses solving customer problems, and obviously by doing that, they're helping their business succeed. Some businesses that haven't been able to kind of make the transition for maybe the sector didn't. It's like hospitality, for example, they've suffered, but other ones that have been able to make a transition to more digital channels have thrived. Even pubs that had no one through the doors, were some of them that were able to create online presences, and they've sold more beer than they've ever before they've been run off the beat.
Quite a few hospitality businesses have successfully sort of pivoted into takeaways and delivery type businesses.
Exactly, yeah. But even gyms, for example, gyms have you'd think, well, can't do anything, but they've been online Zoom stuff, or some have actually made little apps, where so they can channel it straight through there. So there's lots of opportunity, and in a way, it's increased that speed. Yeah.
Brilliant. Kirsty, I know you've got to be off for one, so I'd just like to say thank you at this point. Matt, if you could stay on for one more question, I'd love that, and just pick your brains on a final one. Kirsty, thank you for telling us about Soda. If anyone would like more information, please, you can contact Kirsty on Twitter and the internet, or you can come through Pro Manchester for those details as well. But thank you, Kirsty.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Matt, just finally then, to wrap this panel up, because there might be some people watching this who are feeling a bit inspired, or they are sensing something on their radar here with digital storytelling and UX design and those kinds of disciplines. And we're in interesting times now, because there are a combination of people that are obviously looking to stay relevant within their skill sets, but there are people also looking to retrain potentially and look at new routes. So I just wondered if you had any advice for someone who was either starting out their career or even at the midpoint somewhere around careers in UX and around the type of things that agencies like Academy do.
Yeah, I think user experience actually, the kind of this industry or sector within the larger industry is quite expansive in a way. There's a lot of areas where people can come in on, depending on where their original skills lie. At Academy, we sort of have sort of that kind of T shape kind of thing, where we all kind of can do a bit of the fundamentals, and then we have the main one that we generally work in with some other specializations. But I think a lot of UX is common sense, and a lot of it is empathy. You have to genuinely want to create better experiences, solve problems. So it is problem solving through design, but you don't necessarily. It is creative, but you don't have to be able to draw. That's a fairly good starting point for some people who might want to move into the tech industry. So if you are a problem solver already, and you have creative solutions, that kind of stuff, then there is a way in. There's also the more academic side of stuff, where the researching side, that's huge. The customer behavior research is quite academic, but it can make massive improvements to services and businesses. I saw a talk last year where a team had looked at I can't remember which airline it was in the US, but they looked at how they were displaying information and how people were obviously taking this information on board, and the larger environment that they were using the systems in, and they found some absolute gold in there, and increased the airline's profitability massively. Obviously, if you're in graphic design, it's probably a more easier transition, because you're already problem solving, you're already understanding need, that kind of stuff. So that overlap is really where UX can sit. Yeah, and in terms of how you would start, you can go on the soda courses, or you can. There's a wealth of information online. There's some really good resources out there already. I think that the best starting point is, if you're genuinely interested, start reading about it, start seeing where you can make connections, or where, and then, in terms of getting in the industry, it's the tech industry. It's certainly in Academy, we're always looking for new talent, and we're happy to take people on who might need some training up, if they're showing that sort of enthusiasm, and that, we can see that they've got
I think the
potential.
Yeah, that's important. The important thing to say is, because I was quite, my eyes were opened a little bit to the variety of roles, that exist within the space. And it's important that people realize, design is a beneficial background, but actually, if you're a problem solver by nature, and you can apply creative thought to problems, then really the job is about making people's lives easier through design. And I'd say that was, for me, another of the themes of the day. We've had storytelling, we've had the importance of understanding your customers and shaping things around them, and we've talked about that quite a lot from a content point of view. But obviously, design as well is really important. So we're just about out of time. I would recommend everyone just have a look at UX, because the principles behind it, actually, that, like Matt said, they're common sense. And it's one of those things that, the making people's lives easier, reducing the friction between businesses and brands, or service providers and brands, it's going to be all the more important, I think, in the next 12 months. So thank you again to Matt and to Kirsty as well, who joined us earlier on the panel. It's just left to me then to basically wrap up the day in a typically stuttering fashion. Thank you everyone who joined us this morning. It's been, I think, really enlightening, really interesting. And I want to just say a massive thank you to all our speakers, everyone who took part today, and Virgin Money, the sponsors, as well. Once again, thank you. In the meantime, I will, Dan Nolan is God there from Steve K. Thank you, Steve. I will bid you farewell. Enjoy your afternoons, and we look forward to seeing you again soon at another Pro Manchester conference. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.